Ours was all quiet. American side was bloody World War III going on all the time over there, every night. Big flares going up and machine guns firing. Yet on our side was just dead quiet.
So why had you gone to do the course in America?
Well, because I was selected to go on the F-111, which is the ultimate aeroplane in those days. We dropped bombs all the time, lots and lots of bombs. It was just constantly practicing dropping bombs to get very accurate. I must have hit some sort of target because there was a huge secondary explosion. Like we orbited for some time with just a big ballooning, continuous explosion. So we either hit a large fuel dump or a large ammunition dump or a fuel farm. Yeah, bastard going there, he's dropping bombs on people. God, mate, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought our government was called upon by their government to help them, and I went up to help them. So I thought.
Whereabouts were you born, Brian?
Born in Cottesloe, West Australia.
So, completing high school in John Curtin, you were able to...
Well, then I went to this job as a medical laboratory assistant. I did that for 1 year, and then meanwhile, I think I joined the Army Reserve. And I had been in cadets at school too for 1 year. And I decided at that stage I want to join the military, some form of military. And I applied for every military course I could see, but officer type courses. Like I applied for Duntroon, the Navy, Royal Australian Navy College, Australian Army Aviation Regiment, Australian Air Force Pilots Course, and the RAAF Academy. Applied for all those type jobs. And I decided the life in the laboratory, looking at microscopes, and that wasn't adventurous enough for me, not enough action. And I saw joining the military as a way to get some action. And eventually I was selected. I was selected for the Australian Air Force on a pilot training course. And the day I left, the Army announced I was selected for Duntroon. I'd forgotten to tell the Army that I'd joined the Air Force because I'd applied for them all at the same time. So if they had come up first, I probably would have been in the Army, not the Air Force.
Did you have a preference for either?
Not really. A pilot training course I knew was more exciting, but Duntroon, the Army, I actually originally liked the Army. Yeah, that was the one I wanted to join. Had
you discussed these plans with your parents?
Yeah, they were happy for me to do that. My father wanted me to join the Navy. I applied for the Navy, but never got selected for the Navy. I was not a Navy type. No, they were happy because to them, because my father had been in the Navy for 7 years or something, it was a stable environment. You know, he worked hard, played hard, got paid. You know, not too many diversions that people have nowadays. You know, there's no drugs or anything like that. There wasn't in any way in the services. It was good. It was a good way to mature people and get a skill at the same time.
So what happened when you were accepted into the course?
Just before I joined, I'd never been in an aeroplane in my life, and the Army Aviation Regiment, they flew me to Adelaide, me and another boy from Perth, to Adelaide for an interview. That was my first flight, DC-6. So when I joined the Air Force, I was trained over there. I went over by train, but I had one flight, a DC-6 commercial. Whereas some of the boys on the course, some of the young guys had got pilot's licences. Anyway, I failed it part way through.
Well, tell me about the interview first. You flew to Adelaide for the interview?
Oh, that was the Army Aviation Regiment interview, yeah.
How did that go?
Well, they told me they wouldn't give me the result until the results of the Duntroon selection came out. So I didn't know if I was ever selected because I was selected for Duntroon, so maybe I would have been selected for that. But the Air Force selected me first anyway, so that's why I joined the Air Force. But the interview...
What's the Army Aviation
Regiment? Yeah, they had helicopters and little single-engine aircraft, Cessnas. And now, of course, they've got the big twin-engine helicopters, and they've got quite a fleet now. Yeah, it's quite a big force, the Army Aviation Regiment.
So it sounds like you were destined to be airborne once you joined the military.
I reckon, yeah. That's it.
What happened during that interview?
Well, I just can't... Oh, I remember part of the interview. I mean, this was in 1960, over 40 years ago. But I remember some of the preliminary things I had to do. I can't remember whether it was Duntroon or the Aviation Regiment, but I had to go out to Karrakatta and a series of situations with supposed minefields, and you were given some bits of wood and some rope and a drum and a group of you, and you had to work out how to get across this minefield and negotiate this river. And they were looking for recruits who had leadership qualities, innovative, could organise things. And I'd been in the Boy Scouts. That was another thing. I could tie knots. I could organise guys. A few of us, from what I remember, sort of came up with the ideas and organised things, and a lot of the rest just followed. They didn't want to make mistakes, so they never sort of said anything, and they didn't actually show any leadership qualities, and I guess maybe they weren't selected because of that. But I know the year there were only 2 of us selected for Duntroon, me and another boy that I actually went to school with that year. So, but meanwhile, I joined the Air Force, yeah.
So what happened when you joined the Air Force?
I went to Point Cook.
Well, what happened upon your arrival at Point Cook?
Oh, well, I was just a raw recruit, and you give them very, heavy initial discipline. You got to learn to march, you got to learn to salute, you got to learn all the rank structure, all the military law, and all this sort of thing. If I remember, if you made a mistake or did something wrong, you'd have to run from the flight room down to the main gate, wearing your parachute, which is quite a big parachute over your back, and it was quite difficult. You have to run down there and run back with it. It was like a punishment.
Did they kit you out when you arrived?
Kit us, yeah, got kitted. Yeah, I remember that. We got the old white boxer shorts, and I didn't used to wear white boxer shorts, but so they issued us, and string binge singlets, which was like a big wide mesh singlet, and long pantaloons, which you had to wear under your flying suit. And this was basically in case to inhibit burns, because it was made of cotton, and if you're in an accident, it would lessen the chance of you getting burnt. And we got issued a special watch, either a Jaeger Coulter or a Smith watch, aircrew watch, great big expensive watch. We had to have an accurate watch. And you got I think we got our helmet and oxy mask and stuff like that. That was all quite exciting, flying suit.
And you would have been shown to your barracks?
Barracks, yeah. I remember there were about 3 cadets barracks, 2 floors. I think we started off in, I think it was the top of one of the barracks, yeah. It was a junior course, yep. And we had a room each, a very tiny little room with a bed, a little wardrobe, a little locker, and had a rifle. We had to keep our rifle in our room, had to keep our 303 rifle clean. Inspection once a week, had to polish your floor, to fold up your sheets and blankets in a special bedroll when you had to layer a blanket, sheet, and a blanket around it all. It had to be done just right. Wasn't, but tip it out and do it again. All your clothes had to be lined up in your drawer, the underpants this way, and the socks that way, and the handkerchiefs that way. Your shoes had to be split polished and lined up in your wardrobe. It was all part of discipline, and it was a bit of a pain, but it didn't really worry me.
Well, what was the daily routine during the course?
Can't remember. Because remember, after this 3 or 4 months of pilot's course, then went and did a Navigator's course, which was the same sort of thing. I was a cadet once again. But basically, get up early, shower, shave, get dressed, have your breakfast, and probably out in the parade ground at, 7 or 6:30 or something, 7 maybe, very early. And of course in Melbourne, it was icy cold and frosty and cold wind blowing from the South Pole. When I come from Perth, Melbourne is very, very cold. And there we'd be marching around out there in our greatcoats and just getting completely frozen. And of course, I could march all right, but there's always a few guys that can't march very well. What they call square gait, their hand would march with their foot instead of against their leg. and others will be out of step. And if one person makes a mistake, the rest suffer. You just keep marching until that person gets it right. So you basically teach you not to let the team down. So yep, lots of marching.
So how did you get out of the pilot's course and into the Navigators?
Okay, right. I failed the pilot's course. I went solo, and then basically the first flying test I failed it, mainly on forced landings, glide approaches. I just didn't have the skill, and whether I was shown it the right way, who knows. But I later on got a pilot's licence in my later life, but I've still got one now. But anyway, so I failed the course. There's very strict levels in the RAAF. Quite a few guys failed. I expect a few to fail.
Were you really disappointed about that?
I was disappointed, yeah. I wanted to be a pilot. But my academic levels and everything else have been fine, my military skills, so they offered me a Navigator's course, which I took. And I basically went straight from the pilot's course to a Navigator's course at East Sale, went from Point Cook to East Sale. Within a couple of weeks I was on a Navigator's course. But yeah, so the Navigator's course was, I think it was 1 year. Pilot's course was 15 months, Navigator's course was 1 year. So I did the Navigator's course and passed that. Passed it quite well.
What sort of things were they training you on as part of the Navigator?
Well, once again we went through all the military training, the drill, all that sort of thing. We've done a lot of that, so I was happy with that. Rifle shooting and military law, and lots of lectures, meteorology, mathematics, you know, a whole lot of military type subjects. And of course then we had navigation and compasses and astro navigation and all this sort of thing. And then we had flying. Our flying training was basically we had to navigate the old Dakota or DC-3, a very slow flying aircraft, so the wind affects it a lot. And we'd go out in the middle of Victoria up into New South Wales or somewhere, flying along, navigating by visual pinpoints, or more often by using navigation aids. You can run a manual air plot. You'd plot your position as if there's no wind. You'd then get fixes from navigation aids or visual fixes. The difference between where you thought you were and where you were was the wind effect. So you'd work out the wind, and you then worked out where you wanted to go next. You'd apply the wind to it, work out a heading, and hopefully you'd fly along the track you wanted to. And we did this all the time. Different ways of getting fixes, either by you can astro fixes. There's an astro phase, flying at night. Sunshots in the day.
What is a sunshot?
Sunshot is you can get a shot at early in the sunset and sunrise, or in the middle of the day. You get nice position lines, but any time you can get a position line from the sun using a sextant. So you just stand in the aircraft and look through the sextant and do your calculations and work out, you get a position line. Normally one position line is not enough, you need 3 position lines for a fix, so you get some position lines some other way, maybe off a non-directional beacon or distance measuring equipment, or you do running fixes as you flew past a beacon. You'd take positions as you went past it and then transfer them forward and make a 3-position fix. You do wind drift. I had a drift sight, especially out over the water, but even on the land you could calculate your drift. And then you could do a multi-drift wind. There were all sorts of techniques working out fixes. And they taught us every technique there was.
Sounds kind of complex.
It is fairly complex, yeah, and it's not really used anymore, but because there's so many navigation systems that operate off satellites now that instantly tells you where you are. But in those days it was a more difficult situation. And you had to be able to navigate accurately, to especially later on when you wanted a more sophisticated military aircraft, to actually get to a target on time via a route where you're not detected. That's why they used to have navigators. Yeah. So that was a year at East Sale, and there's lots of other military things. You do survival courses and rifle shooting and pistol shooting, and you've got to reach a competent level in everything you do. You have to be able to swim. You have to do a swimming test. You have to be able to do physical fitness things. We used to do the 5BX system, the Canadian system of fitness.
Sorry, what's that?
It's called 5BX. It's a basically the whole time I was in the RAAF, I pretty well did 5BX. It's you have to reach a certain level of age and skill level for age by doing so many sit-ups in a certain time, so many push-ups, so many running on the spots, so many, you can either walk for, I can't remember, 5 kilometres or something, or run run a mile or walk 5 miles in a certain time. And if you could reach all those number of targets for your age, you're assessed as, like at my age, a 5BX is level 5, status B, and X, I think. We think, well, that was the top level. So if you're in your early 20s, like I was, aircrew, you should be able to reach this 5BX level. And we used to reach, I can't remember the exact level, but basically we used to reach the level we had to reach. Older guys had to go to a lesser level. The type of push-ups, like we have to do so many push-ups and then clap your hands in between. Well, as you get older, you didn't have to do that. And the sit-ups were, the squats and things that got easy. You didn't have to spring up in the air, you just have to stand up. I didn't mind that. It was a good challenge. I used to be reasonably fit.
So you did okay in that
I
area?
did right in that, yep. Some guys could never make it. It was just unfortunate. Same with the swimming tests. Like I'm not a great swimmer, but I can swim all right. We'd have, I mean, one of the tests was every year you had to pass this. You had to swim for, say something like 200 metres in your flying suit, any method you like, on your back, on your front, whatever. I think it was a 1 or 2 minute break. Then you'd have to swim, say, 25 metres underwater, come up under an upturned dinghy, overturn it, get into it, paddle back, 1 or 2 minute break. You'd have to swim 20 metres, rescue someone that was floundering and swim back with them, another 1 or 2 minute break. And then at the end you had to dive down so many metres, pick up a brick and bring it up. And in the end you had to tread water for, I think it was 10 minutes in a 1 metre square. So you couldn't lie on your back, you couldn't float, couldn't just stand vertical, just treading water, just paddling your feet and your hands. And it was to simulate you being in an aircraft that had ditched and you were attached to it by something, by your clothing was caught to it. So you just had to tread water there in a limited confined space, or you're trapped inside it. And we had one guy, I remember, that couldn't swim. And he had to pass the course, basically, to maintain his status. So we used to help him. We'd swim next to him and someone would pull him along a bit, and then they'd swim. The next guy would come up and pull him along a bit. This guy was petrified. He couldn't swim. He was terrified of being in a swimming pool. But anyway, we used to get him through it.
That's
I
amazing.
can't remember how we did. I can't remember what we did when he had to rescue someone. Maybe floundered out and then the rescued person swam back up.
Well, duck diving for a brick.
Yeah, don't know whether he. I don't know what we did. We might have gone and got the brick and threw him off with the brick in his hand. I can't remember what happened, but I mean, he probably shouldn't have been selected if he couldn't swim. But having been selected, we'd help him. And he'd have a go at it. You knew he was scared, but he kept trying. So we'd all try and help him.
That's a pretty brave thing to do.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and that was part. Well, that was one of the things I liked in the RAAF, where you had camaraderie and you'd all help each other. And if someone was down or a bit below par on something, you'd be helped by the rest. And that's one thing the military does. It's not it's a team effort. It's not an isolation. It's like someone being a long distance runner or a rugby team player. You're all team players there. There's no one-off individuals.
What would an average day be like at East Sale?
Well, I think, thinking back, up early in the morning, shower, breakfast, out on the parade ground, march for half an hour, do various drills. You had to do not just straight marching, but various drills. Back to the classroom environment, and then you'd sit through various lectures on navigation or astro or mathematics or Air Force law, writing, Air Force writing, and you had to write all different reports and things like that. The afternoon, more of that, but every so often there would be an afternoon, say, down the rifle range. You have to reach a certain level of skill, marksmanship skill with your 303 rifle or FN rifle and revolver and various other weapons that you had to be skillful in. Another day you may do some sort of fitness, gym work and this type of thing. Maybe one day a week you do that. Now that was the pre-flying phase. Once you got in the flying phase, I just can't quite remember, but say it'd be twice a week you go flying. So that may occupy the whole day or maybe the night. It'd be a 6-hour flight or something like that. So then there'd be preparation of, you do your flight plan, drop your charts, maps and charts, do your flight plan, pre-calculations, and have a briefing before you go, like a safety briefing from the pilot, briefing from the nav instructor. Would
the instructor be on the plane with you?
He'd be on the plane with us, yep. He would mark our maps and charts, he would check all our calculations, and if you made mistakes, you'd be written up as being inaccurate. He used to use a calculator, a circular calculator. Slide rules originally, we had some of them. Plotting, measuring things with protractors, dividers. Yeah, all that calculation.
The really
World War II type navigation stuff.
Yeah, the hard way.
Yeah, the hard way, that's it.
Pre-GPS.
Yeah, yep.
Sounds like there was quite a diversity, like even within a day.
Yeah, there was, yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, you're a cadet, you're a bit of a low form of life because you're a trainee officer, so the non-commissioned officers and airmen thought, they had all their skills and their jobs, and you were a trainee officer, you weren't really an officer and you weren't anything, you're a bit of a one-off identity. And but when you got closer to graduation, they were allowed to go in the officers' mess occasionally and, for dining in night and have a drink or something like that. I mean, if you made a mistake, if you stuffed up, you kicked. There's the threat there all the time that you'd be kicked off course. If you didn't reach any of the benchmarks along the way or any of the tests, you might have got retested once and then you were kicked off course. There were several guys failed the course I was on. One guy had a problem with astronavigation. He kept getting his position lines a long way out, but in all different modes. Like they'd all be to north one time, they'd be to south the next, or there's just no rhyme or reason. It's obviously something to do with his eyes. He couldn't work the sextant properly. It's a shame because he could do everything else really well. Yeah, and of course it was fairly competitive too, because you knew at the end there were going to be prize, awards for top of the course and top of the flying aspect and top of the academic aspect and this type of thing.
So pretty competitive as well.
Yeah, competitive. Yeah, and I think there were about 10 guys, or a dozen guys started out. Can't remember how many finished. Maybe 6.
What do you think was the hardest thing about the nav course that you did?
Just the study to reach the level. I can't remember the pass mark. I think it was something like 70 or 80%. You always had to get high marks and everything. And it was just a lot of study. Yeah. I didn't find anything particularly difficult. The navigation was quite complex and a lot of mathematical calculations. But the military way of life, the marching all the military drills and things, I was happy with all that.
So inevitably, how did you go by the end of the course?
Yeah, okay, yeah, I passed all right. I can't remember. I got something like 3rd overall or something like that. Yeah, I did quite well. It might have been 8 of us or something, or 10 or so come out.
Well, so you managed to find a girlfriend?
Yeah. At least, it was okay. Yeah. No, I enjoyed it so, other than it being quite cold. But that was, later life in the Air Force is far more exciting and interesting than that, because I was in a training environment. From there on, then I went to the Canberra bomber, which is what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to one of our highest performance aircraft in those days. And it was a twin jet aeroplane that flew quite fast and dropped a lot of bombs, and that's what I wanted to do. It was great.
So where were these Canberra bombers?
They were at a place I went to, Amberley near Ipswich in Queensland. There were 2 squadrons and a training squadron there, and there was another squadron up in Malaya.
So it's only really a handful of squadrons that you could have gone to for this.
For that, yeah, bomber. 3 squadrons. Yeah, well, I went to the OCU, the Operational Conversion Unit first, trained there, and I went to 6 squadron. There was only 6 1 and 2 squadron, 3 squadrons of Canberra bombers. Yeah.
How did the conversion work?
That was about a 3 months course. I think there were think there were about 8 of us, 4 crews on it. 4 pilots, 4 navigators. You met up with a pilot, you got crewed with a pilot. And because the pilot's course I was on took 15 months, my nav course took 12 months, I ended up graduating about the same time as the course that I started on. So I crewed up with one of the pilots who was on my original course.
Oh, right.
And I'm still friends with him today. I mean, he lives in Adelaide.
So when you say you crewed up, could you actually choose the person to crew up with?
You basically got together and between you decided who was going to be with who. And we did have a senior officer on course and a couple of senior guys, and they sort of fitted together, but there were, I think there were 3 junior crews. We all crewed together, yeah.
So it was a stroke of luck.
And and after we completed our conversion course, which was basically, going from learn how to navigate a fast aeroplane compared to a slow aeroplane. We flew around at 350 knots, and the slow one flew around at 120 knots. You had to learn had a camera on board. You had to learn to operate the camera. The bomb sight, use that for photography and bombing. You had to learn how to drop bombs. We dropped bombs all the time, lots and lots of bombs. It was just constantly practicing dropping bombs to get very accurate.
How do you drop a bomb?
Well, in the Canberra bomber, you used to simulate being in an operation situation. You come in very low level. You know where your target is. This is where you need navigator planning ahead. So you don't actually see your target when you pull up. And then you pull up to 1,000 feet, which is a height you can drop your bomb at, level out, and then your target appears in front of you. You manoeuvre the aeroplane so that it's lined up with the target. The navigator looked through his bomb sight, which you could lay off for drift. It had a crosshair on it that was focused at infinity, so you look through the glass, through this crosshair at the target. As the crosshair approaches the target, you go to the pilot controls, like left, left, steady, right, steady, steady, bomb doors open, master safety on, right, steady, bomb gone. Push the button, drop the bomb when the crosshair hit the target. You had to position the crosshair on the target by getting the pilot to move the aircraft. We practiced that over and over. And then if you were dropping a high explosive bomb, you'd have to then pull up again to, say, 3,300 or 3,000 feet, because your own bomb would go out that far, so you used to take a 1% chance of being hit by shrapnel from your own bomb, so you had to further pull up to avoid being knocked out of the sky by your shrapnel from your own bomb. But mostly we dropped practice bombs, so you didn't have to do that second pull-up. 25-pound practice bomb. You used to normally drop 6 or 8 every second flight we did.
So how did you go with this process?
Quite good, yeah. I was quite accurate. I was skillful. I had a good, above average, I think was my assessment, yeah, most of the time.
So were you enjoying it up to this stage?
Enjoyed it, yeah, because it was exciting flying, a lot of very low level flying, at quite high speed, and that is an interesting way of seeing the ground. And okay, it was a bit hazardous. There were birds you could hit. You had to keep a lookout for other aircraft. Check on the fuel, make sure you could get in a situation where you're short of fuel. We never did, but aircraft have in the past. And weather, you had to watch out for weather. If the weather, you had to make sure you could get back to your base or to a suitable aerodrome if the weather closed in and throws you out. And often you're flying around the hills with cloud down to the hills and rain showers and everything. It was a bit tricky.
So after you did the conversion course, you were sent to Queensland, is that right?
Queensland, yeah. No, conversion course was at Queensland.
Oh, okay.
When I finished the conversion course, I went to number 6 Squadron. And some of the guys went to 1 Squadron, some went to 6 Squadron. So then I was...
Did you have a preference between 1 or 6?
Yeah, 6 I preferred, yep. Because the guys in 6 Squadron were a good bunch I enjoyed.
So where is 6 Squadron based then?
At Amberley, yeah. It's still there. 1 and 6 Squadron were Canberra squadrons. At Amberley near Ipswich. Well, now they're F-111 squadrons. Right. So I've stayed there all that time. They've always been a bomber, fighter bomber, light bomber squadron. From World War II, 1 squadron's from World War One. They're got a lot of history, those squadrons.
So what was an average day like there?
Average day, well, if it was normal flying hours, you'd have a breakfast in the mess, and I think the morning briefing was at, I can't remember, say 7:30 or something like that. get down to the crew room. There'll be a briefing by the meteorologist, a Met briefing. Air traffic control would give a briefing. Then your flight commander would probably give a briefing on today's sorties, and we'd often have these one or two, say, navigation exercises, which they'd pre-planned for us. Tell us where we had to go. You have to go here to there to there to there. Take a photograph of that and drop a bomb on that. You know, the even said bombing range. And then we'd all go and plan our missions, and there might be 4 or 6 crews all doing the same pathway, the same navigation exercise. So you draw up your map, work out your flight plan, your fuel calculation, all this sort of thing with the pilot. Go down to air traffic control, put your flight plan in, get your Met briefing, your individual Met briefing there. Come back to the squadron and get changed into your flying suit, flying boots, helmet, this type of thing.
What sort of a uniform was it?
I had a green cotton flying suit, one piece with a big zip down the front, brass zip, or I think it was brass zip. You're supposed to wear the cotton underwear underneath, but I always wore cotton underwear, not necessarily this string binge stuff.
String what?
Binge, they call it. It was like a big cross pattern, like pieces of cord. Cross pattern. You had a long sleeve singlet thing and long pantaloons made of this open weave cotton, probably an 1/8 of an inch thick cotton or cotton cord.
Sounds very Mardi Gras.
It kept your flying suit off your skin, so if it got fuel on it was burning, it was supposedly, hit this cotton, which doesn't melt or anything, before to burn you. It was protected. If you had nylon, like nylon would just melt straight to your skin, you'd lose all that piece of skin. So I know guys who've been burnt in bad accidents, and
so
where there's been nylon, they've been very badly injured.
So why did you decide not to wear the...
No, I used to wear cotton, normal cotton singlet, cotton underwear. Okay, I didn't have anything under there. Yeah, we'd never wear nylon. We had a nylon wristband. In the end, they took that off us because someone had an accident and the wristband fused to their wrist and lost all that skin. So anyway, so you get dressed in your flying suit. You go down to the flight line, or you go to the safety equipment room. You pick up your Maywest, which was a little yellow jacket with a life jacket, and it had might have a survival radio, and it had shark repellent one side and sea marker dye in the other, and a whistle and all this sort of stuff. You get your helmet, your own helmet, inner helmet and outer helmet.
Inner helmet and outer helmet?
Yeah, you had a cloth inner helmet with the earphones in it and a mask attached to it. Then you have an outer fiberglass helmet put over it. Years later, it became a one-piece helmet. In those days, it was a two-piece helmet. You had your kid leather flying gloves.
Could you do everything that you needed to do with your gloves on?
Yeah, it was very soft, beautiful gloves. Yeah, they were. Later on, when I was in Vietnam, the Americans used to try and swap anything for these kid leather gloves. You could get a Jeep if you wanted one for kid leather gloves.
Joking.
Okay, so then we'd go down to the flight line, and pilot would sign for the aircraft. There'd be a history of its maintenance history, what things that have previously failed, or some things that may still be carrying a minor fault that was still being repaired. Then we go out to the aircraft and do our pre-flight. And
after you've completed your mission, do you have some sort of a debriefing?
Yeah, when you come back, well, when you normally have to say, part of the test was to get to a target and either bomb or photograph it at a certain time. So other than the bombing range, you couldn't bomb bridges and things, so we used to photograph them through the bomb sight at the same angle that the bomb would hit it. So you take a photograph. Now on that photograph it would have a time on it as well, and it would have the middle of the photograph. They could calculate where your bombing crosshairs would have been when you dropped your bomb. In other words, whether you would have hit the target or not. So that photograph at the end of the flight would be assessed for your accuracy. If you're dropping bombs, you're on the bombing range, you'd be controlled by a guy on the ground, and after you dropped every bomb, he'd give you a result. It was 130 at 22 metres or something, or 22 yards, it might have been metres or yards. So you'd have all these results written down. And then you come back and then you do, well, a short maintenance debrief with the maintenance people, tell them what's wrong, fill out fault reports on the aircraft so it's repaired for the next flight.
You don't really want a lot of things to be wrong with it.
No, but things do go wrong.
Like
you
what?
might have a bird strike, might have a hole in the wing where a bird had punched through. We'd hit lots of birds. We're flying around a bird alley at 350 knots. It's the same height the birds fly at. We're flying around at very high speed. And we can't avoid every bird we see. I've had a few accidents with birds. I can show you. We'll talk about it later if you like. But
Yep, sure.
I've had a few bad bird strikes. But okay, another piece of equipment might have failed. Radio, something like that might have stopped working, and not be performing correctly, and they could repair it. Then we'd go back, and normally when you got your photograph, you could the navigation senior nav officer or whatever it was, I can't remember, on the bombing leader, they'd check your bombing accuracy, your photographic accuracy, and your timing. And there would be a general debrief. All the crews are dead together. I'd debrief everyone. I mean, you could possibly not find your target, or you pull up too late and the target's over there. Well, if you're going to pull up next to your target and turn around and go back and bomb it, you're probably shot out of the sky before you get there. So, you know, part of the trick of it. And all these results would be recorded, individuals, and you would have a running assessment on your bombing accuracy, navigation accuracy. So everyone was constantly being assessed and graded against each other. And you had to reach a certain standard, because supposedly we were ready to go to war, and if you didn't reach that standard, you weren't suitable to fly that aeroplane in that combat mission. Yep.
So why were you posted to 2 Squadron?
Okay, well, I had a funny... I had 2 goes at the 2 Squadron. First of all, remember I told you there was another bird strike where a navigator had his arm broken? That navigator was in Butterworth when it was broken. I was a single living an officer at Amberley in Australia, and we were in confrontation mode with Indonesia, and we had to have, I can't remember, it was 8 or 10 crew, 8 crews available all the time in case that confrontation broke out into a war. So that navigator had to be replaced immediately. So I went up there at a couple of days' notice to replace him, and I was told I was going there for 3 weeks, and I think I was there for nearly 3 months. I left my room in the mess. I didn't have time to wash my clothes. I left some dirty clothes in the corner, all my uniforms in there. I told the mess secretary, look, I'm going away for 3 weeks, but if you want to use my room for short term, you can use it for short term, but I'll be back in 3 weeks. When I came back 3 months later, when this guy's had recovered, and there was an army bloke living in my room. I said, I came back to the mess, and I said, I'm Pilot Officer Gribble, back from my room. The mess secretary had changed. He said, I never heard of you, mate. I said, well, I got room 33 in A block. He said, no, there's an army guy in there. I said, oh, I only left here for 3 weeks. I was away 3 months. He said, well, I don't know anything about you. So I went up there, met this army guy, and I said, well, this used to be my room. I left all my clothes and everything here. He said, well, yeah, there are clothes. I pushed all the uniforms up to one end. He said, all the clothes on the floor had gone mouldy, so I threw them out. So I got my gear and got another room.
What happened? Well, how did you receive the news that you were going to Butterworth?
Oh, I can't remember. They would have just told me at go to work in the morning. They say, so the senior officer would have called me and said, been a bad bird strike, navigator's injured, you've got to go to Butterworth in 2 days.
What were you doing up there in official capacity?
Official? No, official, we're the same thing. We were doing navigation exercise, flying around Malaya, dropping bombs at the range there. Taking photographs of places where you couldn't drop bombs, and just basically being ready, operationally ready to attack targets if necessary.
So you were assigned targets over Indonesia?
Yeah. What would happen is each crew would be assigned 2 targets, a primary target and a secondary target. My secondary target would be someone else's primary target, or my crews, and that was the Australian Canberras at Butterworth, the American. The New Zealand Canberras at Tanger would be given the same. The British RAAF Canberras at Tanger would be the same. The RAAF Vulcans and Victors. There were all masses and masses of aircraft. All were assigned targets, the bomber type aircraft, targets in Indonesia. Primary target, secondary target. We had to know if we were given my primary target, the 2 squadrons given that target to attack, we'd probably send in pairs of aircraft 5 minutes apart. Might send in 4 pairs 5 minutes apart. But because it was my primary target, I'd be in the lead aircraft. I had to memorise the pathway to that target without even referring to a map. I mean, I had a map with me, but I had to have it memorised. I don't know the track, distance, time, levels, everything in my brain, descent into the target. We'd had photography in that. I'd had to memorise where there'd be a mosque, where there was this river junction, this sort of thing. You know, as you went past them, there's features you'd see. And the escape path, we come out at very high speed, the maximum speed we could fly. I had to memorise the whole target info on my primary target and my secondary target. And that way, if somehow going in there I was, you know, airplane damaged, lost my map or something like that, I'd still know my way in there. It's just they just have one person, one crew, expert in each target, in 2 targets. If that target was selected as a primary one for the squadron, they would go in the first aircraft. So they were military targets. There were things like airfields, ammunition dumps, army bases, spread around. Our targets were mainly in Sumatra, some down into Java. But see, with so many aircraft at Singapore, they'd be hitting Java. So our aircraft were mainly in top end Sumatra, which was the main threat to Butterworth anyway, and some of the army bases down near Kuala Lumpur, etc. So we would be hitting the northern targets.
So you were briefed for a full-scale attack?
Full-scale attack. We had aircraft bombed up. We had 4, I think it was 4 aircraft bombed up with high explosive bombs sitting in the revetments at one stage, 24 hours a day, ready to go. We had to have 4 crews in the mess on the mainland at the base all the time. And because I was the only single navigator, I was always on duty. It was always me. And the married guys, 3 of them, they'd rotate, so there were 3 of them living on the base away from their wives 24 hours a day. Pilots, there was a mixture of single and married, so the single guys wouldn't always have to be on duty. So yeah, because there were so many married guys navigators had to be on duty. I was the only single guy that basically I was on duty all the time, and I'd have to personally arrange a swap with somebody if I wanted to go to the mainland. That went for months. I couldn't, you know, go about once every 3 weeks to get a haircut, and that was pathetic. Couldn't find a base.
It's a bit unfair, isn't it?
It is a bit, yeah.
Bit of a handicap being sick.
In a nice holiday resort like that.
Can you think of any other things that happened while you were there that you'd like to recall for us?
Well, I remember one morning once again, single living in Navigator, I got woken up about 3 or 4 in the morning and said there was an aerial search on for, I think an RAAF, a couple of RAAF blokes. They were fishing or something, their boat had capsized and that couldn't get a navigator over the island because you could only come over by ferry. The ferries didn't sail at night, so it was doing them. It had to be me. It was on a DC-3, which I didn't normally fly there if I flew the Canberra bomber, but I had trained on it and I knew how to use the drift sight and everything. So I had to go out on this search and rescue flight, you know, at 6 in the morning. I'd been in the mess till about midnight, but anyway, it had to be me, so it was the only person I. So we searched up and down. That's right, RAAF had an aeroplane dropping flares all night, just dropping flares while they were searching. We couldn't do that in the DC-3. And we searched, so I did that search and rescue, but they found the guy's body a bit later. He'd actually, I think the boat had submerged. They found the boat, all right, still full of water. They should have stayed with the boat. One guy paddled off with a drum. They couldn't find him. The other guy swam to a post in the water or something. He hung on to that. They rescued him. The guy on the drum, who couldn't swim very much, wanted to paddle off on this drum. He should have sat in the boat up to here in water. He would have been rescued. Anyway, it was his body they found, and he died. Crabs had got to him and all that, you know, very quickly. So that was the search and rescue flight I did. I've done other ones from different places, but that was one thing I remember from Butterworth. No.
Had you noticed any changes with Australia concerning the Vietnam War during those times?
No. I don't know whether I was. We found out we were going to Vietnam from Butterworth, I think, just a month or two before we left.
I mean, did you suspect that you'd end up there?
I didn't know, because our government committed a lot of army troops. Air Force had caribous and helicopters in there. Navy had small ships and larger ships bombarding the coast. Our Air Force contingent was a flight of caribous and a flight of helicopters, plus other liaison officers and various things like that. We hadn't sent any attack aircraft in there. I believe they wanted to send, I think we had Mirages then, they wanted to send Mirage fighters in there. The French wouldn't let us. And because, even though I don't know whether we built a Mirage, but they would not allow, wouldn't give us tools and ammunition and stuff like that if we flew them in there. A Bofors gun made by the Swedes. Couldn't use that in Vietnam because the Swedes were against it. They said we won't give any spare parts or ammunition. So various bits of our equipment we couldn't use in Vietnam because of the political bias of the people that had designed that equipment. I think it was around about then the Australian government decided we're going to buy American stuff because they won't stop you going anywhere, and wherever we go, we're probably going to be in there with the Americans anyway. There's no point buying, you know, Turkish tanks or something if you can't use them in Iraq. You know, this is the power that a country that provides military equipment has over you. They'll often make the tools. They won't provide you with the tools, or they make the ammunition, and you won't provide you with the ammunition. But I thought if anything it'd be fighters, but I think they'd even thought about sending the Mirages in there when they found out the French wouldn't let them. Canberras were probably second choice. I think, I'm not 100% sure.
So in other words,
so we found it very short notice before we went there.
so it came as a big surprise then?
Yeah, surprise, yeah. And not only that, about this time we decided we were going to buy the F-111. So they said, and they decided any aircrew that went on the F-111 had to have done a tour of Vietnam, because just about all the Americans going on it was their top bomber. They'd all done a tour of Vietnam. We were going to have done a tour of Vietnam. Plus you got those extra skills, and who knows, eventually the F-111 might have been used in Vietnam. That was their plan. So even though the Canberras went from 2 Squadron in Butterworth to Vietnam, only the crews that were going to go onto F-111s, plus a few others, went with it, and they supplemented it with extra crews from Australia who were going on the F-111s. So in April '67, do you want me to go into the Vietnam phase?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. April '67, 2 Squadron basically packed up and flew up to Phan Rang in Vietnam, and away from the Australian bases. We had an American base up near Cam Ranh Bay, a long way from the rest of the Australians. So, I mean, before that, we must have known months before it, because the airfield construction squadron went up there and built our huts and did a few things for us. We got our parking bays and all that, built hangars and stuff for us.
Did you have any preparation as far as briefing was concerned about the situation in Vietnam before you?
Yeah, I think we've got that all the time anyway. We're constantly updated with political and military situations around the world. Yeah, we're updated with that. I think we did modify our training a bit to train more to the type of sortie you might have to do up there, and we did more high explosive bomb training and pulling up to get away from the effect of the bombs and things. Did more of that, because you used to only be able to drop a couple of high explosive bombs a year, because they were quite expensive, and but I think we dropped quite a few before we went. I could check in my logbook, but I think that's the way it went.
So that was the extra special part of the training for Vietnam?
Yeah, and there were probably other things, I just can't quite remember them. Long way back.
Did you have any leave at all before you went off to Vietnam?
No, you didn't normally take leave in Malaya. You saved it up till you came back to Australia. Yep. If you want to leave, I suppose you could have it, but I don't recall taking any leave up there. Might have the odd day here and there.
So what was your pilot's reaction to you guys going to Vietnam?
Well, the pilot I was crewed with in Butterworth didn't go to Vietnam.
Oh, okay.
He was one of the ones who didn't go.
Well, what happened there?
Because he wasn't destined to go on the F-111, and I think he was more than halfway through his tour. They wanted someone that could do a full year in Vietnam, so they're going to get guys that just arrived or guys that were going on F-111. Now I was halfway through my tour, but to get 2 F-111 squadrons of crews with operational experience of Vietnam, we only did 6 months in Vietnam. And that's what happened to me. I did a 6-month tour in Vietnam, whereas guys that weren't going in 111 did a full 1-year tour. And I was there for 6 months, and another bunch came in from Australia, did 6 months. Then we all went straight onto the F-111 after I left Butterworth, so after I left Phan Rang. So I went up there with the first lot, but my tour was 6 months.
And you knew that before you
Yep.
got involved?
And I knew that I'd been selected to go on the F-111. And not only that,
Is there anything that you did to get selected to the F-111?
well, basically, you had to perform to a certain level. You had to, basically, I think you had to have a permanent commission. I was offered, I had a short service commission, still while I was at Butterworth, 8-year short service commission. After my training, I had to return service for 8 years, and that was the end of it. I could either sign on again if they offered it, or leave. The guys in the F-111s, they wanted to stay, so they offered me a permanent commission. So I basically was in there till I hit retirement age, 47 or whatever it was. And no short service commission guys close to the end of their short service commission were selected to go on the 111. Either had a permanent commission or they just... And I didn't have any very, very junior guys either. They all had done several years on Canberra bombers or fighters or something like that. No one straight off graduation went on F-111s. All had to do an operational tour or several tours. So I was just the right experience level and age and place and everything. That was great. Best aeroplane in the world.
That must have been pretty excited. You're going into a war zone and you're going to end up on F-111s.
Oh, it was, yeah. I just felt I was really lucky. All this same. So
is there any sort of departing party to be had?
Probably. I was engaged at that stage. I got engaged just before I went. I decided this girl was too good. This nurse. I was getting married, so we got engaged before I left. So a bit. I was only going a couple of countries away, but why not be coming back? Who knows? Yeah. So no, there were some parties. Yeah, weird parties, and I just can't quite remember. We were pretty fired up about going up there. Yeah. All about, and a lot of stuff to do. You know, pack everything up. I'd send stuff back to Australia. And
so, sorry, did you fly in?
Yeah, I flew in. Yeah, I flew for Canberra. I was in the first group. There's some photos over there of that. I think there were 8 Canberras flew in, 8 crews. And
where did you actually fly to?
We flew from Butterworth straight to Phan Rang, which is near Cam Ranh Bay. Landed at American base. First time in Vietnam, we landed there. Taxi to our special parking area that our airfield construction squadron had made for us. Got out of the aeroplane, a bit of a ceremony there with Americans welcoming us. Went to the huts that's built and allocated us to a room. Went in there and it was bed and mattress and bare walls. And
did you wonder what you had got yourself into?
No. I was happy. It was the way it was. Yeah. Yeah, it was. Well, it was pretty new. I mean, it was all new procedures and working with Americans. I hadn't really worked much with Americans before. I got different techniques and things, but that's all right.
Were you looking forward to that?
Yeah, we're all fired up. We're all enthusiastic.
And who's your new pilot?
Well, mine was Bob, a guy called Bob. He came from Australia. I mean, I'd known him for years.
Oh, you'd actually known him before?
Oh, yeah, friend. He used to be a navigator and did a pilot's course. I'd known him when he was navigator on Hercules, and then he came with. So I crewed with Bob. He's a good bloke. I like Bob. Experienced. But part way through, I got recrewed with the CO of the squadron, wing commander. So because his navigator left after about a month, I don't know why, just left. So I got crewed with the CO. I would have rather stayed crewed with Bob.
I suppose there's more pressure being a navigator to your CO.
Ah, yep. For someone like me who's a bit of a party man, would have rather not with the CO.
So how long were you settling in for before you went out on your first mission?
I think only a few days. Yep, a couple of days. We got lots of briefings from the Americans who get issued with personal weapons, you know, revolver and stuff like that. We had extra gear at that stage. We had a little extension butt for our revolver. We had to get a thing called a tree scape, which we used to carry, which was because a lot of jungle areas there. If you ejected out and landed in the jungle, your parachute would hang in a tree, and you're hanging from the parachute. The VC fans, they'd shoot you hanging in the parachute, right? So you had to get out of that parachute. Once you hang from in the jungle, you can't do anything. So I had this thing, like parachute cord, around the back of our Mae West, and had a big clip on one end. So and the other end, I think, was attached to your Mae West or something, but hooked onto yourself. You clip this onto your parachute cord, and then you'd release yourself out of your parachute, and then you'd be hanging off your parachute cord by this other thing, and it had a dead man switch on it that if you pull it too fast, it locked. If you let it go, it locked. You just had to pull the right amount, and you could slowly slide down this cord to the ground, and then get away. So it's called a tree scape. If you went too fast, you'd melt the parachute cord, so you had to just do it right. But that was an extra piece of equipment we had, and we had to carry UHF radios, and you know, we had a gun, and you could take extra survival rations in you. But if you checked it out, you had stuff in your pockets here that'd all be torn out anyway, so you carried a few extra things.
So you've arrived.
Yep.
And how were you greeted?
Well, we had there was an American contingent there to greet us. I think there might have been a couple of Australians, the senior Australian guys that were in Vietnam, came up to greet us, like we weren't at an Australian base. And then basically we just took a couple of days to get organised with accommodation and intelligence briefings and equipping ourselves out with our weapons and this type of thing. And then we were into operational mode.
Can you describe the base?
Yeah, great big, mainly flat base. Had two runways. One was a concrete runway, concrete asphalt. The other one was a PSP runway, pierced steel planking, or Marsden matting is another name for it. Is what they used in World War II, all around the islands and in New Guinea and that. Basically big sheets of steel with holes cut in it, and you just lay it down on the dirt or the mud and land on top of it. I mean, you wouldn't see it today, but it was used then, and more in outposts, and they used to land high-speed, sophisticated airplanes on this bloody Marsden matting. We landed on it a few times too.
What was it like to take off and land on?
Just noisy, yeah, clunk, clunk, clunk. In fact, I saw an aeroplane land on one once, and its nose wheel collapsed. Just happened to be looking out the crew room window before I went off on a mission. An F-100 Super Sabre, they look pretty high-speed aircraft, landed, nose wheel collapsed. Just as I looked at it, big train of sparks, and of course it pulled up very quickly, just grinding away the nose, so pretty spectacular.
It would have been a bit alarming, yeah. I imagine.
Yeah.
So, can you describe sort of the rooms and the bases and the...
Oh yeah, okay, well, we had our work area, like our we had revetted parking for the aeroplanes. These are, I think they were steel barriers put up, so if mortars came in or someone threw bombs in there or hand grenades or anything, they'd be contained in that revetted area, which would have one aeroplane in it. So we wouldn't have an aeroplane that blew up the next one, blew up the next one, as happened in Vietnam a few times. So our aircraft were individually revetted. We had a big hangar down there where the ground crew worked to maintain them, because they're all armed and everything while they're working there. And then adjacent to that we had our admin area and our briefing area, one building, the bottom floor. All the buildings we got there were like transportable two-storey buildings. I think our airfield construction squad went up there and put them up. Ground floor was all the admin people, the records and everything. Next floor was crew room, intelligence, briefing room, this type of thing. So we used to go up there and initially we were flying at night. We got our briefings. For the briefing officer to do our flight planning. You didn't have to put in a flight plan, it was a minimal type flight planning because you're all controlled in the air. And that was that building. Then the other buildings, our accommodation was some distance away on up a bit of a hill. I think we had, gee, I don't know how many, but say there was one block of officer accommodation, I think one of NCO and one or two of airmen's accommodation, 2 floors. We had 2 guys to a room, except I think the senior guys up the top had their own room. The wing we had a couple of wing commanders there, I think they had their room each. And then next to that was another single story building, which was our officers' mess. But everything was just erected, put up in a basic state and left. It wasn't painted, anything like that. So with time we actually painted our rooms out ourselves, put air conditioners. When we were flying at night, trying to sleep in the day, it was almost impossible. So we managed to swap, and before I mentioned the Australian flying guys were very good, we swapped cartons of beer for air conditioners with the Americans. So
sounds like a good trade.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Well, I mean, they basically got unlimited stuff. The Yanks, well, they did have then.
Can you describe the accommodation in a bit more detail?
Yeah, well, I don't know. It was just a room with slatted sides on it. It's like the air could come in, you get light in through there. One door, pretty narrow. Just took 2 beds and a walkway between the 2. And I think we had a cupboard there, like a cupboard we shared half of, or something like that. And the wall didn't go right to the roof. It was about a foot and a half off the floor and a foot and a half off the roof, and that was the next room, so you could just talk to the guy next door. It was like a room divider, and that all the way up the block.
What was the routine?
Sorry?
What was the routine?
The routine,
Before
yeah, well, routine
or
is...
after flights?
So when we were on night missions, we'd say starting from the evening meal, we'd have our evening meal, and then you'd probably go to bed and try and sleep. If you're first off, you wouldn't have time, but if you're off at 1 in the morning, try and sleep for a couple of hours. Or you could sit up and read, and then go out on the crew van would turn up maybe an hour or 2 hours before your flight, take you down for briefing, getting your weapons out of your locker, getting kitted up to go flying, do your pre-flight. Then you do your mission, and then when you came back, depends what time of day it was, but if it was still dark, you try and have a sleep. If it was daylight, we'd normally have to front down to the crew room, I think at about 9 or 10 or something, and do work there for several hours in the day. So you didn't just fly at night and have the day off, you had to perform other duties during the day. But
can you describe what would happen in the crew room?
the crew room, yeah, best as I can remember, it was upstairs. You'd go down, you'd go upstairs, I think you go to your locker, you get out of no, I think we're in our flying suits already, that's right. You're changing into your flying suit in your room. Go to your locker, you get your revolver out, Browning 9mm automatic revolver, automatic pistol, sorry, not a revolver. You'd fit that on. We had a stock extender, we'd put that on if you bought that. Some people would have a holster, some would have an underarm holster, some have a around the waist holster. Your Mae West and all those sort of things. You get your maps, your little map bag, your torch, your knife, all the other things you had in your locker, you took flying with it. Maybe spare ammo. Then you'd go to the briefing room and you'd be briefed on the state of the war in South Vietnam, the enemy air activity, where there's like any aircraft, ground fire in different areas, because we were targeted for an area before we took off. And normally we'd bomb that, but often, sometimes in flight it would be changed. So you'd be briefed on the amount of, ground to air anti-aircraft fire, missiles that could be fired at you, where the enemy troops were, the friendly troops were. So a full intelligence briefing. I can't quite remember the flight painting phase of it, but I don't think we did much of a flight planning. They knew where we were going, they knew the call sign, and that was it. So and then, appropriate time before you're due to go flying, you go downstairs, go across on the tarmac, once again check out the maintenance report with the crew chief on the status of the aeroplane, go across the aeroplane, do your pre-flight. Of course, was more involved with the high explosive bombs, so you'd give them a thorough going over and check they're all where you thought they were, and the security of the bombs and the pistols and wires and things like that. And then start up at the appointed time and take off. Sometimes the base was sort of in blackout conditions, so there were no lights, so it was difficult negotiating your way around. Runway lights might be on for your takeoff, and as soon as you take off they turn them off again, because they didn't want the VC to see the actual position of the runways at night, because sometimes they'd come creeping in to mortar attack the aerodrome. So
How often?
Oh, just occasionally. They seem to hit the American side a lot more than they hit our side.
Why?
I don't know, maybe Aussies were nicer or something, or maybe we were... The base was defended by Americans for 1/3, South Vietnamese Army for 1/3, and South Korean Army for the other third. Now the American side, they had minefields, they had barbed wire with tin cans hanging on the barbed wire, so it would rattle if anyone came past it, machine gun nests, mortar bases. They'd be firing very pistol, illuminating flares through the night, firing machine guns. It would always be go on their side. On our side, guarded by the South Koreans, we just had a ring-lock fence, 6 foot high fence, 8 foot high fence. The South Koreans are further into the jungle or the bush, and the VC, basically they stopped them before they actually got to the edge of the base. The ours was all quiet. American side was bloody World War III going on all the time over there, every night. Big flares going up and machine guns firing. Yet on our side was just dead quiet.
Do you think
Which makes me think they sort of maybe overreact a bit.
the Americans?
They were seeing shadows and things. Or maybe the VC kept attacking them and not us. I don't know why or if that's true.
Was it geographical at all? With the...
No, all each edge of the base, I don't think it was much different. No, we had a couple of hills on the edge of ours. They denuded all the hills of all the bush and everything, all around the base. They cleared it back a bit, so you couldn't run in hiding behind bushes and trees. It was pretty denuded of vegetation.
What was the atmosphere like then if there was World War going on the American
Over there,
side?
well, it's just the Yanks, that's just the way they were. We used to drive down from our huts in the crew van to get the airplane to go flying and see all these flares going up, guns going off. Oh, we were mortared, and after I left, the base was mortared a lot more than while I was there, but we had bunkers. We had to build our own bunkers.
Well, what would happen in the case of a mortar attack?
You just go to your bunker, get in your bunker. It proceeds wherever you were. There were bunkers at workstations, bunkers at messes. The officers built their bunker, NCOs built their bunker, airmen built their bunker.
Can you describe a bunker?
It'd be just made of sandbags full of sand, probably to 8 foot high, with like a doorway, offset doorway to get in. So unless a mortar landed inside it, if it landed outside, the shrapnel and shock and that wouldn't come inside the bunker. And the doorway had like you came in the door and then another barrier, then round behind that. So once you're in there, you're shielded from everything other than a direct hit in the top.
Do you recall sheltering from a mortar attack?
Yeah, I think a couple of times we had to get in there.
What was that experience like?
I was alright. It was often just precautionary, that you'd hear something go off, you wouldn't know, didn't land right next to me or anything. Oh, no, just one of those things you expect in a war zone. I mean, we were a bit lucky they weren't guys right there trying to, band us and shoot us. It was a bit more secure than the army guys who were out in the bush.
Did you feel secure?
Yeah, I felt reasonably secure, yeah. Yep. We had contingency plans if something happened. We'd get alert. We had a DC-3 fitted out with machine guns, with miniguns, what they call Puff the Magic Dragon. It was there that could be taken off to climb up and just obliterate an area with a 7.62 mm machine gun fire, light machine gun. There were plenty of troops around. I mean, we all had weapons. All our ground staff had weapons. If necessary, we'd fall back and defend our area. But while I was there, we didn't have to do Yeah, so
What was life, day-to-day life like at the base?
well, much the same as any Air Force base. We had one big mess. Normally they have the officers' mess, sergeant's mess, NCO's mess. We had a great big mess with dividers, so the kitchen area was all the same at the back. All the food was prepared together, just the officers sat together. You lined up and got your food like any mess. Wasn't much different. If we had a movie, an indoor movie, the dividers would be moved and you end up with one big room. So you'd all sit in there together and watch a movie.
What would happen on operation? What kind of operations were you flying?
That's the other bit. Just one thing I'll tell you about the outdoor theatre. We'd be sitting out there. I only found this out later, but we did have a mosquito problem there, and they fogged it and sprayed it and tried to kill them. But quite often they'd spray us from the air. And we had this squadron, I think it was 2 or 3 squadrons of C-123 providers, which were jungle defoliators. They had the big array of sprays. They put Agent Orange into them and various other chemicals, sprayed the jungle, killed all the leaves on the trees. Then the army could go in there and see, or they could, from the air they could observe, make sure there are no ground troops in there. A few times we were sprayed with fly spray, anti-insect spray, by these same aeroplanes with their big array of sprays. But I found out later that they didn't used to drain the tanks and clean them out. They used to pour the fly spray, or the DDT, or what it was, in with the Agent Orange and just spray us. So you'd be sitting there and this stuff would be running down your face. There's a cocktail of Agent Orange and fly spray. Not that we knew, it didn't worry us, but it was quite interesting, when you think back on it. I particularly remember it, so I've run down my face and it always runs into the V of your neck. Yeah.
It's a bit alarming in retrospect.
Yeah, it is, yeah. You can't do much about it. In operation, right, we'd take off. You talk to various air traffic control agencies and the tower and that, and then you'd revert to some en route control unit. There weren't air traffic control, I think. There was some sort of military unit that wouldn't separate you, but they'd just direct you to an area. And we'd be directed from one TACAN, which is Tactical Air Navigation Aid anyway. Basically it gives you a bearing distance from a point. So they'd say go to the, Benoit TACAN 190 at 42, which is bearing of 190 degrees at 42 miles. You go there, then they direct you somewhere else. So we used to move around the country from bearing distance off one TACAN to another TACAN. And eventually they'd direct you to a bearing distance off a TACAN that was in range of a combat sky spot unit. This is when we're doing night bombing. Combat sky spot. These were radars that were developed for the B-52, B-47, the big American strategic bombers in America. When they test, they'd scramble them and test them and tell them, go and bomb this target, simulator bombing. And they'd have these big radars on trains and they'd drive them around America, position the radar there, and in come these B-52s, and they would talk to this radar and say, right, I'm running on target number 7, I've got this bomb load, so-and-so. The ground radar would look at them, see them coming in, it would say, okay, we know where they are, we know the type of bombs they've got, we've got the terminal velocity, the time of fall, we know the average weather for the flight of the bomb, and the navigator, whoever dropped the bomb, would press a button, and then at bomb release, it'd release it. So a tone would come out, and the tone would cut off. The ground radar would mark that position, and say, right, he was at this position, flying on that heading, that track, at that ground speed, with that wind velocity, with that bomb with that terminal velocity, therefore his bomb should have hit plonk. We worked it out by computer, should have hit there. And then they'd back plot that to the target. You missed your target by 100 metres or 20 metres or whatever. This is how they test their Strategic Air Command bombers in America. Well, they did in those days. These radars be moved around the country on train to check out the accuracy of the bombers. They took them to Vietnam and used them in reverse. We used to call them and they'd identify us and they'd guide us in to a release point, knowing our height, our ground speed, our track, our type of bomb with its terminal velocity, the average, we used to give them the wind at altitude, and they'd know the wind in the ground, they'd average it out. And they'd tell us when to release them, and it would then land on some target in the jungle that we couldn't even see. It was black, there was no lights there, no one on the ground, no forward air controller to tell us where it was. But they, for intelligence during the day, they worked out that there was a VC concentration or a camp or something like that. And we'd bomb them, the aircraft bombed them day and night. So they could not evade us at night. The Ho Chi Minh Trail, we used to bomb up the edge of the Ho Chi Minh Trail at night using combat sky spot radar. And that was our night type mission. Medium level, I can't remember, 10 to 15,000 feet, somewhere there. Out of the effect of ground fire, but still within missile fire.
So what danger was there on those operations?
We could get shot down by anti-aircraft guns or missiles. Or you could collide with some other aeroplane. Because sometimes you'd be flying with your lights off. Because they had your lights on, they'd see you. At night time, I was told if you saw the flash, a muzzle flash from a rifle, it was pointed at you. If it was pointed somewhere else, you wouldn't see the muzzle flash. Well, you'd often see muzzle flashes. And when you came lower, you'd see a lot of them. So they're guessing where you are because you've got your lights off. They can hear a noise, they know an aeroplane. Normally the aeroplane's in front of the noise, and they're trying to lead, shoot at you. Occasionally they hit the aeroplane.
Was your plane hit?
Mine wasn't, no. But several aircraft were hit while I was there, and later on they had a lot of hits. Like bullet holes through the tail, the wing, this sort of thing.
Any planes lost?
2.
While you were there?
No, after I left. We had eight Canberras, bombers, 9 crews, and we lost 2 of those Canberras. I think I went there in 67, I think I pulled out in 72, so in 5 years they lost 2 of their 9 aircraft. 1 crew ejected safely, 1 crew is still up there, they never got their bodies. So we did lose a fair proportion of our fleet. 2 out of 9, 2 out of 8.
How long were the flights in those operations?
I think they're about 2.5 to 3 hours.
How would you occupy yourself during that time?
Well, you're always doing something. Like we would always have, it'd be one mission, but we'd have 2 targets. We might have a target, the country was divided up into corps 1 to 4. I Corps, or 1 Corps, was on the demilitarised zone between North and South Vietnam. 2 Corps was south of that, 3 Corps south of that, 4 Corps was the Delta, the southern part of South Vietnam. So we might have a target in I Corps, or we might have to drop, 500-pound bombs on that, so we'd go all the way up there, we'd bomb that, and we have another target maybe in 4 Corps, fly all the way down there, bomb that. Or we might have 2 targets in 1 Corps, I don't know, it varied. And occasionally your target would be cancelled. Intelligence was wrong, or someone else had bombed it, or they wanted to change it. And they'd say, well, we only got 1 target. We only want those bombs. Second target's cancelled. Jettison your bombs to go home. We never jettison bombs. We'd just say, well, we want another target. We'll drop our bombs on. They say, we haven't got any. I say, well, we'll just orbit and wait. You'd orbit maybe half an hour, 3/4 an hour. They would always come up with another target. Just to go out to the different, I believe they used to go to different units, American units and that. So we've got a Canberra up here with, 4 or 5 bombs on it, 500-pound bombs. Do you have a target? Yes. We want to bomb the back of that hill because we know the enemy's just sitting over there. So we'd often get a amended target. While I was there, we never took any bombs back that I'm aware of. We always bombed on 1 target.
What bomb loads were you carrying?
Initially, we just dropped Australian bombs, World War II bombs. The HMAS Sydney, one of our old aircraft carriers, I think it might have been a helicopter carrier at that stage, but we had the Melbourne. The Sydney was used to transport all the bombs to Vietnam for 2 Squadron. A very old World War II bombs, 25 years old or longer, and we'd either carry 6 1,000-pound bombs or between 8 and 10 500-pound bombs. So, and then later on, when we used up all the World War II stocks of bombs, dropped the whole lot in Vietnam. We dropped a huge bomb load up there, 2 Squadron. Like 8 aeroplanes every day dropping 6 to 10 bombs, huge number of bombs. I personally dropped 840 something bombs by 6 months, so we dropped a lot of bombs. After that we reverted to American bombs, 750 pound bombs.
So does your total tally include the American bombs?
Yeah, I might drop some American bombs, I think. There are only a few at the end there, but I think I worked out once years ago, I forget now, I think it was 840 something bombs that I dropped, yeah.
Did your bomb Laos at all?
No, everything in South Vietnam. We had no defensive measures on our aeroplane. We couldn't see behind us. We didn't have any tail warning radar. We didn't have any radar homing warning system, like they've got in aeroplanes now. We had nothing. So someone fired a missile at us, someone came behind us to shoot at us, whatever, we did not know. So we were kept in South Vietnam where we supposedly had air superiority. Now I'm not saying some aircraft, when they were out near the Ho Chi Minh Trail on the Laotian border, Cambodian border, North Vietnamese border, did not respond to some emergency. But our brief was never to bomb outside South Vietnam. So often we're right on the border. Well, we're supposedly not put in an area where there are enemy aircraft. The Americans had South Vietnam after a short. By the time we got there, they had the North Vietnamese Air Force kept at bay up in North Vietnam.
What was the atmosphere like when you would complete or embark on a mission?
It was serious and pretty tense, I suppose. I'm serious, and just, you know, you did not want to do one thing wrong, because not only we're interested in our own safety, fine, but we were carrying a huge bomb load, and you did something wrong. You don't want to drop bombs on your own troops or friendly troops. So we had to be as professional as we could, as accurate as you could. Everything was complied with. We were given coordinates for most of our targets, and we had a map, and we checked them. And a couple of times we queried them. Hang on, we're not sure we're in exactly the right place. We'll hold off, and they'd hold us off and check again. We did not want to drop a bomb in the wrong place or on a friendly. And as far as I know, we didn't. I didn't. And my crew didn't. I don't think ever in the whole time we ever bombed friendlies. I'm pretty sure we didn't.
What about other squadrons?
Oh well, I can't really say much about them, but I know artillery and enemy aircraft, I think there was incidents where friendlies were bombed or mortared or something. Yep.
What would you do when you returned from an operation?
Well, what you wanted me to, maybe I should tell you about how, when we dropped the bombs, how we did it. Do you want to hear that? Or?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. Well, when we were on this bombing run, I mean, they'd have the target, they'd tell us we're all set up. So 5 bombs, so I had a selector, I could select the number of bombs, where they all dropped from it. We had a special sequence to keep the aircraft center of gravity right. I'd select, so they wanted 5 bombs or 6 bombs. We'd start our run in, they'd say, right, you got, 1 minute to go or something like that. Then they might give us a 30-minute marker. Now, 30-second marker, sorry. At this stage, we would probably open the bomb doors. And we had a master safety switch. The pilot opened the bomb, because all the bombs were internal in the aeroplane, inside the aeroplane. You had to open the bomb doors to release them. Bomb doors came out, 2 shell type things came out halfway, and the bombs then exposed to the airflow just inside the aeroplane. Stacked up in 3s, like 1 on the bottom and 2 above it, and 3 groups of 3s maybe, and 1 on each wingtip, something like that. The bomb doors go open. The pilot then had to select a master safety switch on. Without that switch on, pressing the bomb release button would not release the bombs. That was another safety area, so that'd go on. The navigator would be lying in the nose. That's where we always bombed from. He had a bomb release button up there. And the sky spot would say something like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, hack. And when they said the word hack, you release the bombs. But it wouldn't come out like that. It might go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, hack. You couldn't anticipate or anything, but you had to drop on that hack. So they'd be on their radar picture watching us as things caught up and computers worked and everything. So, and then when you drop the bombs, now nighttime you couldn't see them all, but daytime, when you're dropping in the day, you'd see all your bombs fall out, you could count them. We would then just deviate off course, I can't remember, 10 degrees or something, and I knew the time of the fall of the bombs, depending on the height. Might be 6 seconds or something like that. I'd tell the pilot, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and he'd roll the aeroplane on the side. I could look through my nose cone, he could look through the canopy. We had to count every bomb exploding. If we dropped 6 bombs, we want to see 6 flashes. If one didn't go off, we'd have to report back, because the Viet Cong would be there and they'd hear the bombs hitting, bang, 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 bang. They'd know in the middle there's one that hasn't gone off. Now we could drop delayed fuse bombs that might go off an hour later, but what they'd do is they'd tunnel down, dig the bomb out, set it up as a booby trap to get ground troops, and it's a bloody big bomb. 1.5-inch thick steel around an explosive, like half the weight of the bomb was the bomb, so 500 pound bomb, maybe 250 pound of steel. The rest is charge and tail and everything and fuses. And that steel would just break up into pieces, hand-sized pieces, big 2 hand-sized pieces, and fly supersonic and just slice everything in half. So we couldn't afford to have our bombs being used as booby traps. So we'd count them. If one didn't go off, I didn't have one that didn't go off, tell them that they'd send an SAS team or something to detonate it. Our bombs were pretty good. We had nose and tail fused. So the nose fuse didn't go off, the tail fuse would, or vice versa. Yeah, so you roll on the side, count them, you come up and then you tell them ground aid, so you'd seen them all go off, and then they'd send you on your way to your next target. Daylight bombing was different, but that was the night type bombing. And then when you'd finished, they'd say RTB, return to base. You'd go home, you'd call up, and often the aerodrome would be in blackness because they didn't want the VC out in the hills to see them and water them. So you come in and they put a strobe on for a short period of time, which was you know what a strobe light is? It's a very bright light that pulsates, and they would have sequential strobe that would go like that. It would point at the runway. This is right off the end of the runway. They put them on you so you can see which runway you land on, where it is, and then they go off again. Then you position yourself, and then we'd do a big letdown from 10-mile radius, or 12-mile radius around a teardrop letdown. So we weren't flying close to the runway until we were about to land. Then they put the lights on, you land, and then turn them off again.
So approaching the runway, was it?
Yeah.
Were you a bit anxious? Or?
Well, the trouble when you come down there, you come down low. I remember one flight I was with Ron, and I think it was Ron, we're like a beam of the runway, dropping down. I think we're probably down to about 1,000 feet above the ground or something. And next minute, this mighty whoosh, and a big unguided rocket was fired at us from the ground. They must have been sitting there, listening to the aeroplanes going around, and working out when they go over from the noise, and fired this unguided missile up. Went whoosh, must have just missed the aeroplane. A huge, great flame, this rocket went shooting up in the air. But they missed us. And we reported that. When we landed, we reported it, and they sent the gunship out there and just blasted the area. You'd never know if you got the person that fired the rocket or not.
It makes you wonder why that area wasn't more secure.
Yeah, but the thing is, this is 5k away from the runway, middle of the night. Mate, everyone comes back and gets on the perimeter. Night time, there's some of the SAS troops and those sort of things, but an aerodrome's a big piece of land, and to go out 5 or 10k around the whole thing all the time and secure it, almost impossible. VC'd come sneaking in at night, fire their mortars, shoot their rockets, shoot at the aeroplanes, then sneak out again. Next day there's nothing there.
Sounds like a precarious existence.
They were fighting their war, and they had their techniques. We were fighting ours. We were more sophisticated, but not necessarily more successful.
How did you unwind when you got back from an operation?
Well, we had a debrief. We take our flying gear off and our weapons and that, put them back in the hangar. Oh, an interesting tale with that. This crew room that we went to was upstairs. Then where I said downstairs was the admin area. The floors were made of pine with this Browning 9mm pistol. I think it had 15 shots or something like that. There's quite a few shots. What do? You come back and of course you'd put a loaded magazine into it. So, you know, on a gun, if you pull the action back, let it go, it picks up around and pushes up into the chamber. So you got to check your gun's got no bullets left in it when you hand it back. So you take the magazine out, you open the action, you physically look down the barrel. If it's clear, you fire the action, and it sends the bolt and the firing mechanism forward. But there's no bullet there, so that's it, closed. Hand your gun in, your magazine, and your spare ammunition, spare magazines, whatever you've got. This particular guy, pilot, I don't know how he did it, but apparently came back. He must have not pulled the magazine out, and he pulled the action back. Couldn't have looked down he looked down the barrel. Yeah, there'd be no round the barrel, but there'd be a magazine there with a round just sitting there. Released the action. It flew forward, bang, fired it. A bullet fired out of it, went through the floor, slammed into one of the desks downstairs. Couldn't believe his eyes. Pulled it back again, looked at it, let it forward, fired it, another bullet went through the floor, and then someone took the gun off him. So, lucky it was night time and there was no one downstairs, or someone would have got a shot. 2 slugs going into his desk right in front of the top of him. There are a few other incidents, like someone fired a machine gun in the hangar, and I don't know whether you've ever fired a machine gun or military weapon. Once they start firing, they tend to they move away from you, and to hold on to them, you got to hold the nose down when the gun will try and lift up in the air. So you're holding it tight. So if you're holding on the trigger, you probably hold it a bit tighter. This guy couldn't believe he'd accidentally done it, and it's pulling it up in the air, and he's trying to push it down. He's holding it, fired the whole magazine off into the hangar roof. Everyone's lying on the floor, holding their head. I think there were lots of accidents like that. It didn't injure anyone. No. But
was he disciplined? Or?
Well, no one wanted to work with him after that, did they? Probably.
No,
he would have been retrained. It would have been part of his training. So they would have taken him out the range and trained him until he knew that gun back to front. But remember, these guys have all got a technical job to do. They've got to service the aeroplane, load up the bombs, all these sort of lots of jobs to do.
So what kind of things would you do when you're on the ground?
On the ground, like I said, you'd handle your gear back, clear your weapon, hand it in, hand back all your maps. A lot of the stuff we had was classified and have to go back to intelligence people. And then you go up to the mess to see if you get a drink. But if you came back at the CO we had then 11 o'clock, he'd say, okay, like he was the first, I was flying with him in the end. We'd get in about 11 o'clock, have 1 beer or 2 beers, and he'd say, right, close the mess. Next crew would be walking in the door, couldn't get a beer. I've got a good story to tell about that.
You're going to tell us about some sort of amusing story?
Okay, post-flight, night flying, back to the mess for a drink. After a few months I was crewed with the CO, first flight off, call sign Magpie 11. We'd get back to the mess at, say, 11:15, something like that, get a beer. Then the CO, who was my pilot, would say, okay, 11 o'clock, we'll close the mess, no more drinks. And there'd be one crew there that weren't flying. Like I said, we had 8 Canberras, 9 crews, so you'd fly 8 days and you'd have 1 day off. And there'd be other crew members, other members there, like the doctor and maybe one of the engineers and the accountant and a few other people. They could drink. And as he shut the mess, the next bomber crew would be walking in the mess shut, no beer. This went on for quite some time, so we didn't think it was very fair. So what he used to close the mess, then go up to have a shower and go to his room. Before he went to bed, he'd come and look to make sure we'd shut. He'd lift up all the eskies. We had soft drink and eskies to make sure we hadn't hidden beer under them for the other crews. I mean, we were officers. It was a bit childish, I know, but so what we used to do, because I felt guilty, I'd get a beer or 2 beers, and the guys get none. we had one of the airmen we used to employ as our barman. We'd pay him money or beer or something, and he'd serve us.
It's all about the beer, isn't it?
It's a lot about the beer, yeah. All life's about beer. All through, yeah. Anyway, so what we used to do, a couple of us, I often was the one, we'd climb into the freezer. It was quite a big double stainless steel door freezer. We'd climb in there, the barman, me, a couple other guys, and when our RAAF, the CO, would come round checking, the doors were shut, there was no beer, we'd hold on to the inside of the door, and you feel him trying to pull it open, so he'd say, yes, that's locked. He'd turn all the lights off, go up to his room. We'd wait a few minutes, come out all shivering, serving beer again, lights on, next crew would come in, next crew. Sometimes 4 o'clock in the morning, yo, it was a full party, 3 or 4 crews there. It was good. And RAAF would wake up for a pee and come down.
Oh dear.
Yep, so sprung again. So punishment was painting out the CO's office. I must have painted out half a dozen times, I suppose. And ground crew will be there and see all these officers there in their flying suits painting out the CO. We've got painted 20 times. It was a bit childish, but I mean, in the end, he weakened and he said, "All right, you can have 4 cans each in the briefing room, the crew room down. So when you came back, you'd sit down and have a couple of beers." It's all the guys wanted, really. But so he tried to operate it on an Australian normal, 9 to 5 type hours. Operate the mess on those hours, and in a war environment, I mean, that's completely unreasonable. He got the nickname Old Mother, Aronson. Yep.
How did that affect your relationship with him, considering the fact that you were, in the fridge holding the door shut and he was out patrolling?
He never held it against me. No, I saw him years later. He always said he fondly remembered me, and I was his good navigator and all this sort of thing. Yeah. So maybe in his younger day he was a bit wild. I don't know, but you'd think he would have. I mean, when I think back, I thought he was an old man, an old silly old man, an old woman, but he was probably only 45. I mean, I'm 61 now. I just can't ever imagine him acting like him, but that's the way it was. I was 24. He was probably 45, yeah.
Well, it was twice your age-ish.
Yeah, but I worked with guys, 20 years younger than me, and could never act like that to him, Anyway, that's the way he was. But
what did your area look like? Because I understand that you had to build your whole area from the ground up, literally.
Yeah, true, that's true, yep. We had just the basic huts and the mess there, and it was just red dirt. We'd fly at night, we'd try and sleep for a few hours in the morning. There'd be a bloody grader going up the side, grading a road or something. Be lying there, be hot and sweaty, didn't have fans, nothing in those days. And all this red dust would come in through the slats on the wall, settle on your chest, and be red mud dripping down your chest, and you're trying to sleep. It was just impossible. So what we did then, we swapped beer with the Yanks and other things, and we got...
Could they not get hold of beer?
Yeah, but Aussie beer's better. Americans had a funny system. Their officers could drink spirits and beer in their mess. The airmen were not allowed to drink spirits. In Vietnam, the American, unless they were a non-commissioned or a commissioned officer, could not get at bourbon or scotch or gin or anything of it. They could only drink beer, and their beer's a fair bit lighter than ours. They liked Aussie beer. That's what we had plenty of, and we traded. We got it quite cheap, so we traded for the soundproofing blocks, the stuff they put on the roof of buildings, and air conditioners. And each 2 guys in a hut, we got there and we nailed all these things on the wall. Someone put the air conditioner in for us. We painted it out. We made it quite a nice little thing, dark and soundproof, so that when we were trying to sleep, in the day, you could sleep. The graders and that could go up outside, and mortars could be firing off, and it didn't really worry you too much. And then you'd be fit to fly the next night. So that was the thing. But apart from that, we like just walking from one block to the shower, to the toilet block or something, you walk through the mud. So we put in concrete paths. We made all the formers ourselves, and then concrete, trucks have them somewhere, I guess they were runway concrete trucks. They'd come up, we'd pour it, we'd scree it, all the officers get into theirs, the NCO did theirs, the airmen did theirs. Put all paths to our mess, to our shower block ourselves. We put in some grass and little plants at one stage. We had a couple of guys who were dead keen on to cut the grass with scissors because it was just dry and barren and hopeless. And you can either say it's a miserable place, I'm going to be miserable for 6 months or a year and just put up with it, or you can try and make something of it. So, yeah, I've got pictures there of everyone. As a matter of fact, one of the guys in one of the pictures, with me with his shirt off, shoveling sand into, and he might have been when we were building the bunkers, I think it was, yeah, is Errol McCormick, who later became Chief of the Air Staff. Air Marshal Errol McCormick. He's there with the rest all shoveling sand into bags, building bunkers.
What were the ablutions like the toilets and the showers?
Oh, they were good. That was one thing that we got. The Airfield Construction Squadron, Australia, came up to Vanrang, put in a proper shower block, push-button toilets, showers with a concrete floor, and an area there for a washing machine. We had basic accommodation and a nice hygienic toilet block. You go to the American area, we sometimes used to go up there. They had an air-conditioned bar with poker machines, sometimes singers in there singing. You walk outside, they're living in tents, and they've got duck boards in the mud for having showers and long drop toilets. Just a hole in the ground. Their whole concentration was on, their effort was on entertainment, not on hygiene. Ours was on hygiene, not on entertainment. We got it right, I reckon they got it wrong.
That's a pretty big cultural difference.
You think so? For a supposedly sophisticated country, yeah. No, our planners did it right. And we set our mess up ourselves. You know, eventually we painted it and we added bits and pieces and built a bar.
Bits and pieces like what?
Oh, you know, extended the bar and put some more chairs in and made some bookshelves and stuff like that, you know, little basic things. Yeah.
How far away were you from the Americans?
Long way, yeah. They were basically, they were on the other side of the runway on the aerodrome, yeah. I know some of their living quarters was over near our house, yeah. The American Club, Officers Club, I think we could walk there just so far back now. I think we might have got there by van, but we could walk to that. But the rest of the area was miles away from ours.
How did they treat the Aussies?
Yep, they liked us. Yep, they liked us. They wanted as many partners in that war as they could get, like they have in the recent Iraqi war and that. The more friendly countries they get, the better they feel. We were the only ones there with attack aircraft on. We're only Australia, because they had the South Koreans, Filipinos, Thai, New Zealand, Australia. At least, countries supporting them. I think Australia provide the only attack aircraft in all those countries. Yeah. And they actually had an equivalent aircraft. They had the B-57, like I said before, similar to our Canberra. For the first few months I was there, then they were flying them in North Vietnam. They were losing lots of aeroplanes, all the crews getting killed. And they gave the last remaining few to the South Vietnamese Air Force, and most of them were written out in a mortar bomb attack at, I think it was Benoit or something like that. But the Americans continued with Super Sabres, the fighter bomber, and C-123s and helicopters. They had a whole bunch of aircraft at our base.
What do you think about the training that the American pilots and navigators had in comparison to your own?
Look, after this I went to America and trained on the F-111 with the Americans, and with very sophisticated aircraft. I personally reckon the Americans are fairly slack aircrew. We always had Americans in our squadron exchange officers on cameras.
Exchange officers, so you'd be swapping?
Yeah, so we'd have Australian over in America, and we had exchange officers with Pakistan. We used to have a Pakistan pilot on there. We're different countries. But I've been with an American who's been flying with his feet up on the console, instead of on the rudder pedals, smoking a cigar in the aeroplane. Banned. Aeroplane with oxy mask, which is pure oxygen, smoking is banned. Feet on the console, smoking a cigar.
It can go kaboom with oxygen.
Just completely slack. He has an engine failure. He hasn't got the rudder controls. He just ditch in. This is low level, flying out of the sea.
Do you think that the Americans were slack in the Vietnam War?
A lot of them were, yeah. A bit. I mean, a lot of them were very professional, the same as us, I guess, but they were slack guys. I just generally don't think they're as professional as Australian pilots, aircrew. My impression. They lost a lot of men there. Maybe they got blasé and said, well, life's short, enjoy it. I don't know.
Well, in comparison to, you know, the missions that the Americans were on, the missions that you guys were on, did they have more casualties than yourselves?
Yeah, probably did. Look, we didn't go into North Vietnam. When they had aeroplanes going into North Vietnam, they had a huge loss rate because that's completely hostile territory. We supposedly had air superiority, and you'd only basically get shot down from the ground. Okay, we did get 2 airplanes shot down, but they went into more horrendous areas than we did. No, with respect to that, I can't compare us with them for that type of flying.
Oh,
but the general approach to things, I mean, we wouldn't jettison bombs. We had I don't know the statistics, but they're there somewhere, but we had a very, very high efficiency rate for takeoffs, missions, hitting our target, dropping bombs on target. Very, very high, way higher than any of the American squadrons there. So that says something. We were more persistent, maybe more professional. Maybe we had easier targets, I don't know, but we just end up, the results show that we had a very, one stage there we were the leading squadron in the whole American wing for getting bombs on targets.
How do you sort of keep track of those statistics at the time? Was there sort of like a bit of competition going on?
Yeah, it was a bit. I can't remember, once a week, Friday or Monday or something, there was a meeting in the commander's office, and they'd show all the statistics of all the squadrons, how many targets, how many bombs, percentage hit rate, percentage this, percentage that. We always came out very good, except for bomb damage assessment, because we didn't have anyone to go and check after we dropped bombs to see what the damage was. Well, initially we didn't anyway, later on we did. So we would have all these bombs dropped on target, on time, bomb damage assessment, nil. Americans would have, 50 metres of trench, 50 killed by air, all this sort of stuff.
Gee.
So it looked like, it didn't look right. It became so obvious after a while, they sent our little aeroplanes out to check after we bombed, yeah.
Would there be different height levels that you'd be dropping bombs from?
Yeah, I just can't quite remember. I think it was somewhere between 10 and 15, 18,000 or something for that night type bombing. Combat Sky Spot. We did a couple of missions in the day using it, but normally night. Later on we went to low level bombing with a forward air controller. That was different. That way, I haven't spoken about that yet, but that just came in as I was leaving. I did some sorties on that, and later Canberra's, I think for about a year or so we were doing half of each, then eventually they did mostly just about all low level, visual, forward air controlled bombing.
What was the benefit in changing that?
Now they didn't trust our level, the Americans didn't understand our level of bombing, they didn't trust it. We bombed in a level mode, they always dive bomb. They don't understand bombing other than dive bombing. And it took us all that time to prove that we could drop our bombs steady on target. Initially our first low level bombing was done by using Australian forward air controller in the Australian area. Then they observed. They eventually said, all right, your system of bombing is accurate. We'll let you go onto other targets. It took a while to convince them. Yet our system was a World War II system. They'd used it through the World War II war for years and years. So when we got to low level bombing, I think we might have started out about 3,000 feet and eventually might have gone out about 1,500 feet, but you always had to pull up to 3,000 or 3,300 depending on your bomb. So you just got down to the 1% chance of being hit by your own bomb. And 1% was acceptable, high percentage weren't.
Why did they change it though to the low level if they actually
agreed? Because that was our normal method of bombing. That's how we bombed in Australia. We've been bombing for years and years. We know we're accurate. We know we can drop our bombs within about 20 metres of the target. Americans insisted we did this high level sky spot because they weren't going to let us drop visual low level.
Oh, I get you.
Yeah, it was only after so much, saw all our professionals, all the bombs we dropped, and we never messed up, never mucked up. Then we did some low level in the Australian Corps. They let us loose to do it. They controlled the war, we didn't.
Because the higher up you are, surely that's the safer position to be.
Yeah, but it's not as accurate. Oh no, you can. We're dropping on their radar call. Their radar. I mean, how accurate is that? When we're down low level, we're bombing on a smoke rocket, the forward air controller, little light airplane. He's flying around. He's talking to the ground troops. They said, we've got VC in the bush over here. We want you to hit that area just north of that hill. He flies around, he sees them. They're shooting at him. I want to shoot him down because he's going to call in bombers. He then moves off. He fires a orange, say an orange smoke marker. We come down there, he says, see my orange smoke marker? Yep, we're holding off. He said, right, I'm going to fire a phosphorus rocket or something, 80 metres to the west of that. That's where I want you to aim for. So you come in, then he might fire another colour rocket, change, I want you to go for that. Then he might say, just about at least 10 metres left of that. Drop your bomb. And you've got your crosshair on a smoking rocket there. And it's then where you sometimes see enemy troops run around just you're releasing it. Then you pull up, you look down, check your bombs go off. He comes in, looks, counts what damage you've done if you've killed anyone, or what he can see, or trenches knocked out, or waypoints, or weapon storage points, or ammunition storage, or something like that.
And what sort of a plane is that small plane that you just mentioned?
Called forward air controller. It could be, it could either be a single engine, piston engine aircraft, or so they had Cessna 337s, so it's twin engine, like a propeller on the front, one at the back, push-pull. Used them for a while with a twin boom tail. Little jet aeroplanes, but they're smaller, slower flying, more manoeuvrable aeroplanes. They can fly in low, close to the enemy. I mean, we come thundering in at 350 knots, 700 kilometres an hour. We drop our bombs from several mile back. But they hit the ground within, 6 seconds, I think they're there. So we're not really suitable for flying around seeing individual bunches of troops where he is.
Because that sounds like a pretty stupid job to have.
It is. And not only that, if he's flying along peacefully, they see him, they all stop. If he starts orbiting them, they shoot at him like mad. Because if he's orbiting, he's seen them, he's going to call in bombers, so you've got to shoot him down.
Is he armed?
Yeah, with a rifle or a revolver or something. Some of them had smoke rockets, might have had a little minigun, but that's not good enough. I mean, who knows what they've got.
So it's just one guy in a plane?
Forward air control. And that's quite a few of our fighter pilots went up there as forward air controls. Because they couldn't go up as fighter pilots, because they wouldn't allow our French Mirage fighter to go to Vietnam. It was only bomber pilots and navigators going up there. The fighter pilots went up, a lot of them trained as forward air controls, went up there, and quite a few of them won bravery awards. They're flying in low and slow, right in the face of the enemy, basically trying to attract fire so they can get their targets to call in the bombers, fighter bombers.
So they were Australians as well?
Yeah, Australians. We started out bombing with Australians, but sometimes there'd be Americans, yeah.
It just seems like one of the most high-risk jobs I think I've ever heard of.
Yeah, but what if you're an Army Scout, something, you go out the front, you go through all the tripwires and that's waiting for you.
But I mean, as
Attack the middle of the thing, then wipe out the scouts, it's...
But as far as aircraft are concerned, I mean,
It is a very dangerous job, I agree. Yeah, if they shoot him out of the air, he can't call us in. That's their aim. I've been up with one of them on a flight out of Phan Rang. There was an army guy based there, and he was more of an artillery, called in artillery, but it's like pulling an aircraft. And I went with him, and he had a little rocket firing thing on the left wing and a machine gun on the right wing, like a little 182, I think it was. Little.
Was this a mission that you went up on?
Yeah, I volunteered to go to see what his side of the work was. And we fly around, and you see everyone's in black pyjamas walking along. It's they're not VC, they're VC.
How can
and
you
fly
tell?
around. Well, he just reckoned he knew. I don't know. All look the same as me in black pyjamas. Fly around, then we didn't actually call in any artillery or anything but coming back, he knew an area where somewhere, and he fired off all his miniguns and rockets in there. I think he just did to impress me, but we were very close to them, and you can see their faces, and they were looking up at you. If we had have orbited, they would have, probably if they were at VC, would have taken some reaction. I don't know, but they do that all the time. They're cowboys, but they're brave.
And you decided to volunteer for this exercise because of why?
Because I want to see his job. As well, they said if anyone wants to come along, come on. So I said, right, I'll go. A couple of us went.
Well, I suppose it's good to see the other guy's perspective.
Look, when your number's up, your number's up.
Is that how you look at it?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't deliberately putting myself in a danger, I don't think. It's just, you go around worrying about what's going to happen to you all the time. You have a miserable life and you get run over by a bus looking behind you for the bloody taxi that's going to run you over. I don't know, who knows?
Did these guys get a high level of respect from folks such as yourself?
Yeah, forward air controls, yeah. High level of respect. Matter of fact, I think Vance Drummond was the forward air control that initially we did our trials with, and he died some years ago, but he was a very experienced fighter pilot. And I think he was even a Korean War pilot, actually. He went back all highly experienced, respected pilot. He volunteered to go up there as a forward air controller. Yeah, true sort of image-making hero type person.
Would they do 6-month or 12-month tours?
Oh, I'm not sure. No, a normal tour was 12 months. I was a bit lucky, I only did 6 months.
I was just wondering, considering, you know, the high level of risk involved in the job,
Yeah.
that the tour might be short.
I don't know, I'm not sure. Yeah. But everything is planned on a 12-month tour for most people. Army, Navy, Air Force, the whole... Well, Navy was... Well, guys, yeah, the Navy had guys in Vietnam on choppers and that, yeah. I think it was all 12 months.
Are there any sort of safety features involved in the bomber that, you know, say if you do get hit and you do come crashing down, is there, like, have you got a parachute? How do you eject out of there?
Yeah, ejection seat. Our Canberra bombers were built between, I think it was 1953 and 1955. They were designed in World War II, quite an old aeroplane. But I think there's still a few flying today, 2004, around the world. But in the 60s, yeah, they're in their heyday. Had quite an old-fashioned ejection seat, Martin Baker 1C seat. You pull the face blind down, it fires you out of the aeroplane.
There's a thing here that you...
Face blind, yeah. Later ejection seats you can pull under the handles or between your legs or something, but ours had a face blind. I've got the face blind, pulled it down, bang, out you went. It didn't have bow yangs on your legs, so if you didn't have your legs tucked in, or out here, the airflow would hit them and they'd flap around and break in about 3 places. So later model seats had bow yangs to pull your legs in so they couldn't fly out. By pulling your face blind down, you keep your arms to your side, because if they went out here, they'd all break into bits, you know, when they hit the airflow. Yeah, so it had a thing that separated us. If you're below a certain altitude, it popped open the seat belt, popped open. You then had to force yourself away from the seat. Later ones have an apron that pushes you away. So we were a pretty basic ejection seat. But, you know, it had been used, and it was used in Vietnam. 2 crew got out. So we had an ejection seat. And of course the minimum for ours was 1,000 feet, 250 knots, straight and level. If you're under 1,000 feet, if you're less than 250 knots, if you weren't straight and level, you had your wing down a bit or nose down, you were going to break a leg or worse, or not survive. So that was a minimum situation to get out safely. If you're higher, better, faster, better. If you're slower, of course the airflow doesn't pull your parachute out properly, or you know, you don't clear the aircraft properly. Aeroplanes nowadays are 0-0. 0 height, 0 speed, everything. Just fire the aeroplane, you're safe. But we had to be at a height with some speed.
What, the ejector seats actually propel you to such a distance that...
Yeah, nowadays they do, yeah.
It's safe to do it at any level.
That's right. Yep.
So that's a hell of a...
0-0 seats now, yeah.
Well, that's a hell of a lot of propulsion that you're sitting on.
Well, I mean, I later trained on the F-111, and you could actually be under the water. You wouldn't fire your rocket underwater, but you could fire it, break away and float to the surface. But you could be 0-0, and it's got a proper rocket. The back of the ejections, the whole canopy goes away. The back of the canopy becomes a wing, and it actually flies. You've got a 2-stage rocket and 2-directional rocket. It flies you forward and up, allowing your parachute to deploy, big parachute to float you down.
It's almost...
Yeah, so there's far more sophisticated methods than our poor old Martin Baker 1cc in the Canberra.
With the thing that you pull down, so you've got to let go, otherwise...
No, pull it down, bang, you're just holding that, you're going up. And I've never ejected, but I've been an ejection seat trainer. Pull it down, bang, you feel the jolt, look out and you're up in the air, that's it.
What does the trainer look like then?
Just a big a big rack that goes up, well not quite vertical, it's a slight angle. You sit in it on the ground, bang, whang, you feel this big slam, you look out and there you are, I don't know, 20, 30 feet up in the air. One of the problems with ejection seats is that there's a very, as compared to say a rocket motor like the F-111, you have a very high amount of G for a very short period of time. Now, this stress is taken up in your backbone. That's why you've got to sit very straight upright. If you sit bent, your backbone can sort of crumble as you do it. If you have a padding in your seat, say rubberized padding, as you're going up, the padding compresses, and up and down it goes this sort of thing. As it goes up, it crunches up your backbone or your spinal cords. So we used to sit on a water bottle. We had our parachute, then I think it was the life raft, and then a water bottle that you sat on. It was very hard, water is hard. So that if we ejected, you had just a complete solid base fire around, so you wouldn't get back damage. I mean, people still get some back damage. Yeah, so that was one safety feature. We had, what else? We had survival radios. There were beacons on them. We had a thing called we had a little strobe light. That when you're on the ground, you could fly this strobe light at a rescue helicopter.
You could fly
this signal. No, a strobe light, just very bright light. You could send him little signals with it, and it had a shroud around so only someone looking straight down at it would see it. We had a pen gun flare thing with a little, like a pen, and in it you put a tiny little flare, a little row of flares, like a little thing you put in your pocket. Put a flare in it and fire it, and up goes a little flare. Put another one in. You carried all these things with you. Radios, pen gun flares, strobes. You might have smoke markers and that, but you didn't want to make too much of a fuss on the ground, because once you came out, they'd be looking for you. They saw aircrew eject out of a Canberra or any aeroplane, they're out trying to get you. So you want to hide and only signal to aeroplanes. They were so smart they used to get radios off killed crewmen, and they had English, quite pucker English speaking people, and whenever there was someone crashed nearby, they'd give a signal, oh, I'm over here, come and rescue me over here, I'm near this tree. And they'd be all there waiting to shoot down the rescue helicopter. A rescue into a place like North Vietnam involved the big Jolly Green Giant S-61 or what it is, rescue helicopter. Probably an aircraft going in first, jamming all the radar. A couple of fighter aircraft to shoot down any other aeroplanes that come to shoot down the rescue helicopter. Maybe some ground attack to shoot down missiles that might be fired at them. Maybe a tanker to go with them, and the rescue helicopter. It's a huge mission. And a lot of, to rescue. I did rescue quite a few people, quite a few aircrew. Successfully, yeah. I think there were some bad cases where a lot of the rescue aircraft got shot down as well, but they did rescue a lot, yeah. From what I understand, our crew that went down, pilot and Navigator, ejected, they ended up either side of a hill. It was at night time or in late afternoon or something, but they had to spend the night in the jungle. They never met up with each other. I got individually rescued though. Okay. And they would have been hiding. There would have been someone looking for them probably.
A lot of people looking for them. You mentioned, I think, before that you would get fired at with mortars. Have you told us the story of where you were fired at with mortars?
No, well, I didn't actually get fired at with mortars. I got a rocket. I got a rocket fired at me in flight. I did mention that before. We were coming to land on the 5-mile orbit or whatever it is, and we were down fairly low coming in, and this mighty great rocket was fired off next to us. Just missed us, like completely illuminated the sky, and they must have been working on sound or something. They reckon they had the right spot and just fired it at us. Don't know whether the airplane went out, shot the area up. It was at night time. Don't know whether they probably never got them. There were mortar attacks on the base while I was in Vietnam. Not in my area, but there were around the base. We'd have to go into bunkers a few times, but after I left there was mortared quite a few times in the Australian area as well.
How much?
A risk. That's just a risk of the base. Yeah.
How much could you follow what was going on in the Vietnam War from the larger perspective, you know, like newspaper articles?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we were briefed, intelligence brief, the Tet Offensive, all these big major events that happened in Vietnam, we were fully briefed on that. And you know, sometimes it would be that the North Vietnamese had moved down back to Viet Cong, and there was a major push on a major area. And we were just briefed because we knew we were going to get targets in that area. And we would. We'd go up there and we'd just bomb all different targets around that area. And you had to keep an eye on how it was progressing. If they were advancing in, you know, eventually might be a stage where you had to evacuate the base, move off somewhere. That could happen even while you're airborne. You'd be told to go and land somewhere else. So, yeah, we're pretty well informed. I mean, as best as the Americans could inform us, did they really know what was going on?
Got doubts, have you?
Well, I don't know. You see a lot of movies, you wonder who was really in control and how well they had it planned. They didn't win that war.
Did Australia have any intelligence coming back to you, or were you using American?
Well, mainly American, yeah, but we had our own intelligence officers. I'm not sure the source of their material, but I assume from American. No, but the Americans got it from South Vietnamese. You know, they'd have people who'd pass things to them. But there again, yeah, it will be vetted. You don't know how accurate it was. One thing I do remember being told by, I don't know whether it was intelligence, someone anyway, that the poor old people that did worst out of the war were the peasant farmers. They didn't want any part of the war. They was happy farming their rice field, selling their rice, doing their thing, letting their kids grow up, hopefully go to school. What would happen, this war's on, so the South Vietnamese would have equivalent of national service, so when their son hit 18, he'd be inducted into the army. The Viet Cong needed troops as well. When the son hit 17, he'd be grabbed into the Viet Cong. And it could be a stage where one son at 18 goes into the army, another son's called into the Viet Cong, both against their wishes. You have son, brother fighting brother. The poor old peasant farmer, he was taxed by day by the government. You know, you made so much money, you pay this tax, you made so much rice. Night time, the VC would come in and tax him. We want money, rice. He was taxed both ways, he lost sons both ways, and then there'd be a bloody great battle on his plot in his village, get bombed, shot, poisoned, village headman, they'd elect their own headman, VC would come in and cut his throat. You don't have a headman, we're in charge of you. The army would come in and say, we think you're giving information to the VC, so we're going to burn your village down. They just missed out in every single way. They're completely innocent, and both sides got them. It's not only the South Vietnamese government, American, Australian, whatever, it was also the VC. They did exactly the same thing. They worked more on terror tactics. They'd make a public display of picking the elected leaders and cutting their throat in front of the whole village. Watch them bleed to death. Don't you work with the government, you work with us. No, it's terrible.
Did you get reports of that at the time?
Yep, it wouldn't be an official report. You get this info. I mean, we had padres there and that they'd go out and work in the villages and try and help the people. We used to put in money for little charity things that he'd say, well, I want to, you know, this lot, their school's been bombed, we want to fix it up and put money in, or go and, some of the guys are going working bees and things like that.
Well, that's
you
nice
sort of know, he's not making up for what happened to him, but you sort of knew what was going on. But you hear these tales.
It's just hard to be put in your situation too, dropping bombs on...
We were told, the Vietnamese government wanted us to assist them. We were part of SEATO. Butterworth was the FIAF, that was SEATO, Southeast Asian Treaty Organisation, which is America, Philippines, Australia, New Zealand, Thailand, South Korea, Pakistan, and I think England. And Vietnam was although we were told, was a protectorate country. Without risk of being overtaken by their elected government, risk of being overtaken, where to go and defend them. Pakistan and I think England elected not to take part. All the other countries did, basically American driven. We thought we were doing the right thing. We thought they wanted help, we were there helping them. That's what we're told, I believe that. Years later, looking back, all the GMs and the twos and all these people, they're all bloody corrupt leaders. they're elected, but you know, in a corrupt sort of way. It's just a waste. Pathetic. Trying to prop up a corrupt government to stop communism taking over.
Did you have much contact with, well, with your wife-to-be during this time?
Yeah, I used to write all the time, yeah. Every second day something I'd write. Mail would come through. I think I had 1 or 2 trips back to Butterworth, ferrying an aeroplane back for... I actually weren't supposed to talk about this, it was a bit secretive. There were different groups, and one, Malaysia didn't support the Vietnam thing, but a couple of times I went back for a day, sort of thing. So, yeah. And then at the end of my 6-month tour, I didn't take my R&R, I saved it up at the end, and I went from Butterworth, I was from Fan Rang via Butterworth back to Australia, and 2 weeks in Butterworth, that was my R&R. And that's when I got married, we got married, honeymoon, back to Australia.
Could you actually request some of these missions because of your
yeah,
intention?
I asked that, you all nominate when you want your R&R, because you had to spread out, you couldn't all take it at once. I said I wanted it at the very end. On my way back, and I wanted in Butterworth, which is one of the locations you could go for R&R, on my way back to Australia. I said, fine.
How often would you get mail?
I can't really remember, say, I don't think it was Daily Mail move. I probably, we were writing a lot then, probably every couple of days, 2 or 3 days. My mother used to write to me. We used to get Red Cross parcels.
No, what was in them?
If I remember right, something like a cake, Christmas cake or something like that. A can of beer, 1 or 2 cans of beer, packet of cigarettes, cake, maybe soap. Just Aussie type things that, you know, it was good.
What did you miss most?
The thing I missed most, when I came out of Vietnam, the first thing I did was get a fresh tomato and eat it. I just never ate a tomato up there. Everything, eggs were powdered, potato was powdered, milk was powdered. There were no fresh tomatoes. There were some salads, but I just never got a big juicy red tomato to chew. And that's what I craved the most when I left. I got to back in Malaya and the tomatoes aren't very good there. I got a tomato and chewed it.
It's funny how different people crave different things, you know. It wasn't a sizzling steak, it was a tomato.
Yeah, tomato, yeah.
I think we're coming to the edge of that tape, so... Oh, have I?
I never talked about the low-level day bombing. That's, I don't know whether it's worth continuing on with that, but oh, I suppose I did cover it a bit, but it was a bit more. It was where our aeroplanes got the most damage, bullet holes through them. One aircraft had a serious accident with a piece of bomb going through, and I think the Navigator was hit with a piece of the bomb. This sort of the old Ned Deuce. We had a lot of battle damage on our low-level bombing. And of course they could see us when they were shooting us. It took them a while to work out the lead. Like aircraft that dive bombs, it's actually coming at you at a pretty constant angle. So you can aim at it, just get a lead in front and just fire and fire and fire at it. We come in low level, our approach angle is constantly changing. So that as you get closer, we're going faster over the top. Further away, it doesn't look so fast. So they had to work out their lead angle, but they sort of got it right after a while, and they were putting holes through the cameras. Canberra was such a basic aeroplane, because it could take holes through it without structurally damaging it or without damaging the flight controls or anything. There was, all the controls were aluminium push rods. A pilot pulled the control rod back. A push rod through levers and that went up to the tailplane and moved the elevator. Direct linkage. No electrical cables, wires, hydraulics, nothing. At the wings, little ailerons went up and down. Rudder went left and right. Nothing hydraulically boosted or anything. The only electrical trim was the tailplane trim. That was an electric motor, but that was only the trim, not the elevator. So a bullet could even go through these push rods, and you could still move them. Whereas modern day aeroplanes are all, you know, little electrical current goes up a wire. You cut the wire, current doesn't go up the wire anymore. Hydraulic rams and all these things will all be damaged, not the old Canberra.
So in some...
the fuel tanks, that's one thing they did modify in the Canberras. We were using a more volatile fuel. We normally use kerosene or Jet A1, but up there we had a thing called JP4. It's a more volatile version of kerosene, partway towards avgas or petrol, which is very flammable. So So what they did, they nitrogen purged our fuel tanks. We had nitrogen tanks on board that put a nitrogen overpressure on top.
You were just talking about the fuel mixture?
We had a more volatile fuel up there, so we purged the fuel tanks with nitrogen. So that little gap above the fuel in the tank that gets bigger as the fuel gets burnt is normally a mixture of fuel vapour and air, explosive mixture. So, and they used to fire tracer rounds, so like every 5th round was a tracer, so it had a phosphorus piece in the bullet head that was on fire as it went through. And they use that for night time, so you can see where your bullets are going. You see this line, so it's every 5th bullet. So if this went through your fuel tank, or even another bullet could possibly ignite it. So what would happen to go through the fuel, which is cool, and then it would hit this fuel air mix and explode. So we had a fuel vapour nitrogen. Nitrogen is an inert gas, so the bullet would just keep on going, even though it was a phosphorus round. It wouldn't set fire to it. That was one of the modifications they did to the Canberras before we went to Vietnam. They also put in a steel plate under the pilot's ejection seat and under the nose where the Navigator lie. I think they put one there, armour plated. So if a round came up, it wouldn't go through the pilot, through the Navigator line down. So there was a couple of modifications they did to our Canberras.
What sort of operations were you completing towards the end of your tour?
Yeah, end of the tour was a lot of low-level stuff. It was right in the last bit of my tour. But later crews did more and more low-level. They were more interesting. They were more hands-on. You had to do more things yourself. Like just getting to your target and this sort of thing, dropping the bombs, but you had to actually acquire the target. And you'd be pilot would be talking to the forward air controller, and you're visually identifying his flares and his smoke markers, and he might change the colour and fire another one and say, right at the last minute, say, bomb 20 metres north of that, and you have to pull over and drop your bomb. And then, or they might abort you right at the last minute.
Sounds more hazardous than the early operations.
It's more hazardous, yeah, and a bit more stressful and concentration required.
How did you manage the increased stress towards the end of your tour?
Oh yeah, it's all right. Good. Yeah, that was the sort of bombing I was used to. I'd done that for the last 3 or 4 yees, so I was happy. I was more content doing that.
Were you having any anxiety about nearly completing your tour?
No. And I mean, some people might have worried a bit about their bombing accuracy and that, because we hadn't done it for 4 or 5 months or something, but I'd done it for so many years that I was happy doing low-level bombing. I used to have quite accurate bombing, and I was confident and happy. So to me, I would have rather the whole mission been done as low-level bombing, personally, because I know it's more accurate. I know I can see my target. I know I'm hitting it. So rather at night time, you're relying on someone else.
What were you did you have any reservations about completing your tour? Or?
Not really. No. I was only young. I was 24. You're pretty invincible at that age. Didn't worry me. No. I wasn't stressed out by it then. And the only incidents, that rocket fired at me. A couple of years later, I lost a couple of mates up there. They still haven't found their bodies. That's a bit upsetting. And
what was the incident that took them?
Oh, they believe it was an air-to-air missile. I think the one that was shot down the crew got hit 3 times. They took a couple of hits, ejected, and got another hit. They saw the hits. The crew that didn't come back, we don't know. They might have been hit and not seen it, tried to eject, got blown up, might have landed and been killed. Matter of fact, I went to a reunion, I think in about 86 or something, so it would have been 15 years after they went. And I met the mother and father of one of the crew members. And they said every few years the press would come up and say, we've got some information. Someone has found your son's watch. Like I said, we had these special Jaeger Ultra or Smith's great big watches, quite expensive watches. They've found your son's watch. There's some hope. And then they'd get a story. Yep, the Canberra crashed. 1 crew member was killed. 1 was alive. The live bloke was taken out and taken away by the BC into Laos. Geez, he might still be alive in a camp. All those stories about the prisoners kept there for 20 years in Laos. But in the long term, they couldn't. They said, we know he's dead. But just every time a story comes through, we get a little bit of hope. And yeah, that's very upsetting. You feel really sad for them, for the parents really. When the guys are gone, parents. Right. Another time I was a bit concerned there. We did this night bombing, and I must have hit some sort of target because there was a huge secondary explosion. Like we orbited for some time with just a big ballooning, continuous explosion. So we either hit a large fuel dump or a large ammunition dump or a fuel farm. And I just thought, well, we must have hit a friendly fuel dump. It's too big. The explosion is so huge. And you know, we reported it all, and we waited, and we checked for days and days and days. Never ever hit a local Arvin fuel dump. So we must have hit an enemy ammunition dump. That was huge, yeah. But they never ever could tell us what it was or anything. We just watched this explosion go on for a couple of minutes. Strange. Anyway, they kept us in the dark a bit, didn't really tell us everything, I don't think.
Did you have any apprehensions about leaving?
No, I was happy to leave, yeah, no. That's what you look forward to, leaving, yeah.
What happened when you left?
I can't remember how I left now. I think I went out on a Hercules down to Butterworth, I think. I think it was a Hercules. Others went down to Saigon and flew out on commercial jets, but because I wanted to go back to Butterworth and get married, I think it was a Herc. Flew me out. Might have been a Canberra.
Who did you leave with?
Hmm?
Did you leave by yourself?
Yeah, by myself.
What was your journey home like?
Well, of course, to Butterworth's only a couple of hours. Southeast Asia's not that big, really. Like one place to another in a couple of hours. Well, then I had 2 weeks in Butterworth, where I'd been 6 months previously. I knew the place. I got married. Some of my mates in Vietnam arranged for them to come back by Butterworth and attend to the wedding. Probably about 6 or 8 of them, because we all finished around the same time. Plus I had other people at Butterworth I knew. I knew everyone at Butterworth. Followed the whole officers' mess. There was 180 people. Followed the whole lot. I knew 90% of them. That was great. Yeah, I was out of Vietnam, finished.
So what, you were married on your way home?
On my way home, yeah. My wife got married, came to Australia. She'd never been to Australia before in her life. She came from the Orkney Islands, north of Scotland.
So it was a big shindig, huh?
Yep. Yeah, a lot of people, yep. And of course, well, we arranged it ourselves, but you know, the catering's fairly reasonable price in the mess. You pay the military price. I had friends that used to fly Herc squadrons, and they were bringing. I got them to buy champagne and stuff at Edinburgh from the wine fields there, and they bought that up. And I bought in Vietnam before I left. I bought a bunch of liquor. You're not supposed to take it out of Vietnam, but I bought it. But I remember I think a litre of gin was $1.60. So
it's pretty cheap, gin.
Yeah, so I bought about 3 cartons of spirits down. Yeah.
Got rotten.
No, when I was, like I said, 180 people or something like that. But I catered, you know, they reduced the catering right down. By buying the wine and the liquor overseas, yeah, and the beer from the mess. Yeah.
So what plans had you made to bring your bride to Australia if she'd never visited Australia before?
Yeah, no, well that was it. I came to Perth, stayed with my parents for a while. They met my family here. Then I went to Amberley, and then I was getting ready to go to America to train the F-111.
Did you take her with you to America?
No, not initially, no. They wouldn't, only paid for us to go over. We all went over, but by then my wife had met the other wives, because all their husbands just come back from Vietnam and they were going away, so some of them only just got married.
So I imagine you'd settled into married quarters at
No, I couldn't get one. I was too junior, so I had a private rental place in Ipswich, yeah, as did a lot of the guys. No, you had to be around for a while to get the Air Force accommodation in those days.
How long did you have to settle down together before you went to America?
I think probably a couple of months. A couple of months at Amberley, yeah, that was it. Right. Then I went out and took off for another 8 months. It's a 5 months course, but dragged out to 8 months. And partway through, I took her over there for 2 weeks or something like that. Qantas had a special on. I had to pay it, yeah.
So why had you gone to do the course in America?
Well, because I was selected to go on the F-111, which is the ultimate aeroplane in those days.
Why had you been selected?
Because they wanted, well, they just chose guys in the age experience bracket that had done a tour of Vietnam that they thought was suitable for flying it. That was it. I'd come off at Canberra. It was a high-speed aeroplane, going to a much higher-speed aeroplane. Just about all the guys that come from Canberra's bombing experience, high-speed navigation experience.
So how was the F-111 anticipated?
Oh, it was great. Oh, well, I mean, that was a very sophisticated aeroplane compared to the Canberra. And, you know, it was a complex training course. We trained in, started in Sacramento. I had to go into a B-47, I'd never used radar, so I had to go and do an aircraft radar course, the B-47, which is like a 6-engine B-52. Trained on that.
What was that like?
Just a simulator on radar training. Yeah, that was good, yeah. Then we went down
What did you learn?
Learned all about radar navigation, how to operate radar, you know, work out, navigate via it, how to, you know, what the picture looks like, how to identify targets using radar rather than visual imaging.
This must have been state-of-the-art technology.
It was fairly modern, yeah.
What did you think of the technology?
Oh, great, yep. Well, the F-111 was far more sophisticated than that, of course. Yeah, so I did that. Then I went down to Clovis, New Mexico, Cannon Air Force Base, and then that had all the F-111, just straight F-111 training. It had like a swing wing, so you showed all that. It had all the bombing system, you could see that. Had engines all broken down into different engine components. You could study every system on the F-111 there, and we were examined on it, tested, and got certificates part of that course. I lived, I think I was there for probably about 6 weeks, and we all lived in this block of flats. There were 24 crews, so that's 24 navigators, 24 pilots. There's a lot of Australians there, and or maybe say 20 of each because there was some already there. And while I was there, there's a recording studio in Clovis, New Mexico. And I don't really remember a group called Jimmy Gilmer and the Fireballs. They had a song called Bottle of Wine. Road of the Wine, it's an old song. He and his wife and his band were living in this motel. So they took a liking to us. So we used to go and have parties with Jimmy Gilmer and the Fireballs.
They would have been pretty wild dudes, wouldn't they?
Oh yeah, a bit. Yeah, well, we were all there single, but yeah, no, they were good. Yeah, around the swimming pool. So that was an interesting part of things.
Can you tell me about the training that you're doing with the F-111?
Okay, well then from then we went to Fort Worth, to Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas, Nevada. I was there for about 3 months in Las Vegas, Nevada. 25 years old.
Can you describe the base?
Oh, it's just a great big casino, isn't it? The base was out of town a bit. We lived in town.
I asked about the base, not Las Vegas.
The officers' mess was full. We couldn't live on the base, so we had to live in town. So we'd commute every day out to the base, and that's where they had all the F-111s for flying training. So now I only did, I think, 26 hours in the F-111, and that was the minimum. That's what they go, part of the package for training the crews, and we were then supposed to fly them back to Australia. But in that 26 hours I did some navigation. Well, I did about 4 bombing sorties, dropping bombs, high speed, radar on radar. I did an air-to-air refuelling sortie, general training, handling, so it was quite good. And that was the first time I ever saw the F-111 dump and burn. Have you ever seen that? Where they fly along and they dump fuel and hit afterburner, and you get a huge torch of burning fuel at the back of the aeroplane. You've never seen it in an air display?
I have.
Spectacular.
Why do they do that?
Oh, just to be spectacular. If you have to dump fuel to reduce your weight to land, say if you're too heavy to land, you've got to land. Dump fuel, but if you hit afterburner, you actually burn the fuel as you dump it, which is the best way. You're not dumping raw fuel, you're burning it. But as a air show display feature, it is very spectacular. So that's the first time I saw that. We had each course the Americans ran, like we were on a conversion course with some Americans in Strategic Air Command, because they were SAC, that has the Americans have Tactical Air Force, Strategic Air Force. Strategic has all the nuclear bombers and all this sort of thing. Some of their crews are on that, because the F-111 was designed as could be a nuclear bomber. And there were a couple of crews on it, and they had always had bombing trophies on every course. So we all tried and drop bombs as accurate as possible. And me and my pilot got the most accuracy, so we got the Top Gun award. So I've got a Top Gun sitting over there on that table. I actually have earned a Top Gun through bombing in the F-111.
So did you feel a special affinity with Tom Cruise?
I don't think he'd even been born at that stage. It was in 1968. He probably wasn't born.
When you saw the movie?
Yeah. Yeah, well, there was seemed to be a lot more, I Love Me in his movie than there was in the days when I was flying, yeah. So, my last wife didn't like that in the house, so it lived in the shed most of my first marriage. And Sue now, she lets me keep it in the study. So.
Why wouldn't your last wife let you keep it in the house?
She thought I was a monstrosity. It's a American thing with a piece of marble and then some goldy things with eagles and guns, and it's pretty outlandish sort of thing.
A fully blown trophy.
Yeah, it's just big. It's over there on the table. The pilot that I was with in that course was a guy called Dave Rogers, and I left the Air Force some years later, but he went on full career and he became Deputy Chief of the Air Staff, Air Vice Marshal. Another guy on the course, Errol McCormick, he became Chief of the Air Staff, Air Marshal. Quite a few of the guys on that initial F-111 training. Some got to air rank, or some got to group captain, like very high ranking officers in the Air Force. Made a really good full career in the Air Force. They were, they were probably a bit like the cream of the guys in those days. Yeah, they were top-notch guys.
Well, before I ask you further about your career in the Air Force, I just want to ask you a bit more about the F-111, what you could tell me about it. Special features? Or?
Yeah, well, when we went onto it, it could fly at Mach 2.5 plus at altitude. That's 2.5 times the speed of sound. And supposedly, secret-y stories that it had been flying up to about 3 times the speed of sound. And that is very, very fast. Faster than the Mirage fighter we had. It's probably even faster than the F-18. It's faster than most of the aeroplanes built. It was a very, very fast aircraft. Low level, it could fly at Mach 1.2 plus. So 1.5 times the speed of sound on the deck. Not many aeroplanes can fly that fast, that low to the ground. Okay, now it couldn't fly for long periods of time at that speed, because once it burn up a lot of fuel. Also, the leading edge of the aeroplane got red hot, so you'd lose your structural integrity. But it could fly for a period of time at those very high speeds.
Why could you fly at higher speeds at higher altitude?
Because it's the airflow. The Mach number is a proportion of the speed of sound, whereas in thinner air up high, the airspeed works on the amount of air flowing over the aircraft. Where the air's thinner, there's less air flowing over the airplane, even though you're going faster. So you go at the very high altitude, you can fly at very high speed relative to the ground, but the same speed, airspeed in the airplane, because the air's a lot thinner, so there's less air going over it. Whereas on the ground, for that amount of air going over it, you're at a much lower speed relative to the ground. Yes, it's Mach number it's called, yeah. So the very high speeds can be flown at high altitude.
If that plane was so fast, why aren't planes flying that fast now?
Some will go up to about Mach 5, I think. It's just that it needs a lot of engineering, and is that little bit extra, say from Mach 1.8, 2.2 or whatever the F-18 to 2.2 or something, or the Mirage, to go to 2.5, the extra engineering is not worth it. The F-111 was a big, heavy aeroplane. It's about the weight of a early model Hercules or a DC-9 aeroplane. It was a very big, heavy aeroplane, over 100,000 pounds, which is what, 50 tons. It's a big aeroplane, much, much bigger than any of the other F-18s or Rajas or Canberras or anything.
What material was it made out of?
Oh, not quite 100% sure. I think it was aluminium, and there were composite bits in it, and what do you got, honeycomb areas in it, and I think some structural steel bits in it. The big wing carry-through box pivots and that are steel, I think.
But it wasn't like the plane's made of
No,
Kevlar.
it's not made of carbon fibre and all that sort of stuff. No. And titanium, that's the other thing they use nowadays. It might have some titanium, but a lot of them got a lot of titanium. It can take very high temperatures, and it's lightweight and strong at the same time. But the F-111, remember, was built in 1968. This was.
So how many of these planes was the Australian government going to purchase?
I think we were getting 24.
And they were going to form a new squadron, were they?
Two squadrons, yep. 12 aeroplanes per squadron, originally it was. One squadron and 6 squadrons. And we had 24 crews over there, and each crew was to fly an F-111 back in 1968. And I was all there ready, trained to fly it back. We finished our training at, partway through our training at Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas. The government started, there was a crash where an aircraft wing carry-through box failed and wing fell off and crew were killed. The government then had second thoughts about it, so you've got to fix this before we accept them. The Navy, what had happened previously was the Navy, United States Navy, it was a multi-service aeroplane. Strategic Air Command, Tactical Air Command, United States Navy, I don't know about the Marines, but Australian Air Force and Royal Air Force. And the American Navy said it was too heavy for the carriers, so to lighten it up, the wing carry-through box, the theory is that a piece of steel with holes cut in it is as strong as a piece of steel without holes cut in it. So they cut holes in it to reduce the weight, but it failed. So they decided it wasn't as strong as a piece of steel without holes in it. So then they had to repair them all. Anyway, well, this went on and on and on. Our government didn't accept until 1972. That's when they had to retrain all the crews again. I trained in 68. I left the RAAF at the end of 1970.
You must have been disappointed to come home without your F-111.
It was, yeah. We came back in the back of a Starlifter from America to Hawaii to Fiji to Christchurch to Richmond. The milk run that goes across to Learmont, bringing mail and staff and goes back every week. Sitting in the back of that with big engines and stuff.
I can tell by the way you describe it, you weren't too pleased.
I remember the Melbourne Cup was run while we were halfway back, and the crew up the front broadcast the back end of the back. I think it was, just keep thinking it was Red-Handed won the cup. Anyway, we had a little sweep down the back, but it was disappointing. We came back in a couple of groups, but in backs of these transport aircraft. Get to Richmond. Customs gave us a pretty quick run, then I got in a Caribou, I think I went up to Amberley. But no big dramatic arrival in our 111s with all the press and the fanfare and everything. No, it was disappointing.
What was your morale like when you got back?
Oh, it was a bit low, yeah. And not only that, when we came back, we were then 2 squadrons of crews with no aeroplane. There were Canberras there, but they were all training guys to go to Vietnam, and we'd all been to Vietnam. So we were basically squadrons of crew members with no aeroplane to fly. And I got the F-111 simulator going, we used to fly that. In the end it got so boring, I used to sit in the pilot seat, he'd sit in the navigator's seat, I'd fly it and he'd navigate it. The crew outside would be firing missiles at us, failing engines, breaking this and that, and the yaw damper's gone. Because we'd done everything there was in it. You end up having a crash because they'd fired so many missiles at you and the navigator's flying. And we did tours of industry, and I've been to the Bulimba brewery about 4 times, and been to Golden Circle Cannery and envelope manufacturing companies and soap manufacturing companies. I went to every industry tour there was. I passed exams for squadron leader.
What were you touring industry places for?
Just for something to do. We had no airplanes to fly. We had all these highly trained pilots and navigators, no airplanes to fly. Used to get about 5 hours a month. Play golf, go fishing.
Sounds like a semi-retirement.
Yeah, but we just wanted to fly airplanes. Not what we wanted to do. I did promotion exams as squadron leader. I did computer training courses, instructional technique course. Every damn course I could think of, I did. And then I decided I was getting out of the Air Force. That's basically when I resigned. And I can't remember, I think it was early 1970, I tried to resign. Then they said, you can't resign because you've got to do a return of service on the F-111. So I had, 3 overseas conversion, 3-year return of service. So how can I do it? You won't let me fly it. There's no airplane to fly. Eventually I got out at the end of 70.
What did your wife think of your decision?
Oh no, she went along with it. Yeah. I was instructing in the end on the Canberra bombers and training young blokes going up to Vietnam, navigation and bombing and various things like that.
Did you find that rewarding?
Not as much as flying operational aircraft, no. No, it was all a bit of a letdown in the end. And
a lot of the veterans I've spoken to have found something rewarding in being able to pass on their experiences and knowledge to...
No, I did that for a bit, but I was right in my peak of flying when I was 28. Joined the Air Force at 18, I left at 28. I was right in the peak of my training, my accuracy, everything. And couldn't get an aeroplane to fly, so that's why I decided to leave.
Bit early to be put out to sea, huh?
Yeah, I mean there would have been some career there, and also I decided I was Navigator. I was a flight lieutenant at 24, just like captain in the army, and navigators weren't getting promoted. Some of them were retiring. Flight lieutenants, 45 is the retirement age. They were retiring at 45 as a flight lieutenant. Well, there I was at 24 a flight lieutenant. I've got 21 years as the same rank. Not on, I'm leaving. There's a bunch of us resigned at the same time. And I'd sussed out another career as a civil air traffic controller. I'd gone and applied and done all the aptitude tests and everything, and they said, right, we'll accept you.
Can you tell me about that application process? Can you tell me about the application process?
For that? Well, every job I've gone for, the military, civil air traffic controller, everything, is masses of aptitude tests. There'll be a bunch of numbers where you've got it'll be 1, 7, 13, what comes next? Or 1, 24, 156, what's the next number? Something, what's out of sequence? Words, what's the odd word out? All these sort of things. Be a series of levers and wheels, and if you push that lever that way, what happens to the bar at the end? It'll go around this wheel, up there, a piece of string down there, all this sort of thing. You've got to work out where it goes, just looking at it. And hundreds, and time pressured on you. There'll be psychological tests. A whole lot of logic things to do that. Then partway through they'll say, if you had to kill your grandmother, how would you do it? And you don't have an option, I don't want to kill my grandmother. So I just didn't answer it. I was trying to pick nutcases. I had one of the things for air traffic control was that they want to see you can do several things at once. So they gave me this map of England. They said, right, first question, the grid reference so-and-so, what's the name of the nearest railway station? So write that. Okay, I want you to go 7 miles southeast, hit the first road intersection, then go north to the 3rd railway line, and then turn east. What's the name of the next street, or something like that. And you have another sheet of paper with 1 to 20 on it, nothing on it. You'll be working away at this, and you might have a protractor and be measuring things. I'll say, question 27, 5 plus 8 minus 13 plus 22. Finish. Never say it again. You have to stop what you're doing there, immediately go over question 17, do this mental addition in your head and write it down. Back you go, and you're waiting for the next one, and it doesn't come for a while. And question 56, or question 6, 2 divided by 3, add on 56, go to the next, multiple of 10 and add 5. That's it, never repeat it. So you basically got to be doing several things at once. And you have to stop one thing, concentrate on another thing. I suppose it's like working on something, doing a flight plan and aircraft calls, you've got to answer them, go back to what you're doing. Over the years I've done so many aptitude and psychological tests, you wouldn't believe it.
Why is that?
Because all the jobs, civil air traffic controller, pilot, navigator in the Air Force, even applying for the Army, done training, they're all the sort of jobs where they require a certain aptitude and psychological standard to get in. They don't want people with character defects, they don't want people with You've got to always be able to do quick mathematical problems in your head. You don't have to refer to a calculator or anything. And logic decisions and basic physics solutions and stuff like that. It's just sort of area of work I've migrated into.
No, I was just curious that you mentioned over your life.
Yeah, well, I've only ever worked in the aviation industry, really, other than my short time in the hospital.
So what was your reaction to being accepted into the...
Air traffic control. That was, it was good, yeah, but like I said, they accepted me, then the RAAF wouldn't let me go. So then air traffic control said, well, look, we understand you've got a problem getting out of the RAAF. When you can get out, just let us know and we'll put you on the next course. So eventually I got out of the RAAF after applying and saying I can't give return of service.
How did you manage to get out of...
Because I applied again to resign. Like, I had a permanent commission, so I can actually resign instantly. But the return of service in the F-111, you've got to give a 3-year return of service on an aeroplane you've trained on overseas. Well, I trained on 68, and here it is 70. Okay, no, it wasn't a full 3 years anyway. How can I give a return of service on it? We didn't even have them. We didn't even get them till 72. And that's the logic I gave to them. They said, oh, I guess you're right. We want you to stay, but pointless trying to force you and let me out. So that's what I joined ATC. And I had a good career in civil ATC, 22 years.
What was it like
I was in
entering?
the RAAF for 9.5 years.
Did you have any reservations about leaving your old mates there?
Yeah, I did. And even up to this day, I still don't know whether I made the right move, because...
You began to mention how illustrious some of their careers
are. Yeah, well, navigators of my ilk, my course and that stayed in, it all turned around a few years after I left. Navigators started getting promoted, and they got very well promoted. Yep. Most of the guys on my course that stayed in got promoted pretty well.
Ever had any second thoughts about your decision to leave?
Yeah, well, you can't go back. I couldn't reverse it.
No.
And
but just in reflection, retrospect?
Yeah, I have, because the mates I made then were the best friends I probably ever made. But there again, I guess in your early 20s, in a military environment, a lot of hardship in training and that, you've all got to fight it together. Probably, going through hardship together, you do make closer mates. And it just seems I never made, people I've met since then have never been the same calibre, I don't know.
Well, I guess you've had those bonding experiences, haven't you?
Bonding, yep. Close bonding, yep. And danger, like in Vietnam and that, you put up with that, all that together. And it just seemed everything was a bit low-key after that. I left Civil Air Traffic Control, I mean, it's pretty all go and everything. And I ended up in the search and rescue part of that. And, you've got pretty important decisions to make, and you've got a lot of people's lives in your hands, but it just never seemed as critical as flying high-speed aircraft in a war or whatever. It just didn't seem as important.
Can you break down your career in the Civil Air Traffic Control?
Yeah. Well, I started training in Melbourne in the college, went to Sydney, finished my training there. I worked in the Area Control Centre there for about, I think I was there for about 4 years. Then I went to Port Hedland. I did a search and rescue training course, went to Port Hedland for a couple of years.
When you say search and rescue training course, what sort of context?
For aircraft that get lost or call for help or have a fire, have to ditch, force land, just disappear, don't turn up. Someone's got to work out where they are and send aeroplanes out to search for them.
From an air traffic control perspective?
Yeah, well, air traffic control is responsible for the search and rescue of civil aircraft, and also responsible for conducting air searches for the police and air searches for the Maritime Safety Authority. So there's a ship out to sea that called it distress or didn't turn up. They would say, this is the search area, we want you to search with aeroplanes. So I would then have to organise aeroplanes, work out how much each aeroplane could search, divide the area up into different search areas, separate the aeroplanes, send them all out, brief them, and just keep going. Arrange helicopters to go and rescue if necessary, and you have them positioned in the right places. So it's quite it's quite involved. And sometimes you'd have up 20 or 30 aeroplanes out searching. Big logistics. Sometimes you have to organise the fuel, place to run out of fuel. Observers. Yeah, it's quite a big business.
So what proportion of your air traffic control career was devoted to search and rescue?
Oh, 3/4, the last 3/4 of it, yeah.
Well, what if we perhaps go into a discussion about your, early career in the civil air traffic control? What position did you enter?
Oh, I was mainly doing flight data.
What's that?
That's right, just getting the flight plans and working out the like everything works on little flight strips, and the approach controller gets one, the arrivals controller. So flights going from Sydney to Melbourne, you've got to have information. The tower's got to have some's got to go to the approach controller, some to the en route controller. And at the other end, the person down there makes up strips for the en route controller, the arrivals controller, the approach controller. And there's a whole bunch of guys employed making out these strips. Started doing that. I worked some time in the tower, surface movement control.
Whereabouts?
Sydney Airport. I did some time in the area control centre.
What's the difference between working in a tower and the area control centre?
Well, tower's only got the area responsibility is just the immediate aerodrome, what you can see basically. And nowadays it's really only the aerodrome runway. They own the runway. They clear aircraft, take off and land on the runway. After that, the approach's responsibility. Approach can give some of the airspace back to the tower, but basically once they're airborne, it's approach or departures or whatever.
So you're responsible for avoiding collisions on the ground?
Runway separation, yeah. And surface movement controls, which I did, that's basically all the taxiway. Sydney's very complex. You've got terminals either side of the runway, you've got lots of runways, and you've got to manoeuvre aircraft around and get them across the runways and that in between landing and taking off aircraft. It's pretty complicated.
How long were you working in that capacity?
Well, I was there for about 4 years. So.
Did you see any accidents?
No, but I was in the tower once when a Pan Am 747 landed on runway 25, which is the short runway, after it had been raining, and it didn't have an ILS, an instrument landing system, just had the VASIs, and the 747, the pilot sitting way up in the air, and they got a special technique with the VASI's visual approach system. So there's an angle that you look at the lights, they come at a certain angle, but if you're sitting up very high, you've got to be I can't remember, but as if you were flying high on the approach angle all the time and you're actually in the right angle. Anyway, he came in too high. He landed halfway down the runway, and we were about to hit the crash alarm. He had full reverse thrust, which all the engines full power pushing backwards basically. But you could see the water coming up, had a compressor stall, bang. The water got sucked up, it shut the engine down, and he pulled up with the nose wheel in the overrun of the runway. Another 100 metres on is the Cook's River, which is a concrete lined drain effectively. Going to that would have broken his back, possibly caught on fire. It was so close.
What was the atmosphere like inside the control tower in that incident?
We're just hoping that he'd pull up. I believe that pilot came back as on a smaller airplane next time, lesser capacity. It was a pilot error. Yeah.
What capacity were you operating in when that incident occurred?
I was training on approach. Yeah, as part of my training, I basically cleared him to land. That was it. But I had approach controller with me, but we couldn't do anything. We were about to hit the crash alarm when he pulled up.
So he was basically in your hands?
Sort of, yeah. I didn't feel too successful actually on that one. nothing of my doing, mind you, but yeah, that was the only.
Not a bad way to sort of start.
That wasn't. They didn't come to anything, but I mean, it could have. Yeah, but you know.
What an introduction.
Yeah.
To approach control.
Yeah. Okay. Then and a bit of area control. That's controlling aircraft en route. That for a bit.
Is that lower pressure or?
Yeah, but as you get into terminal airspace, it's more high. I never worked in any of the high pressure areas like the approach and that. Comes in the terminal areas, all the aircraft are bunched up together. In the end, you come to approach and they're 3 mile apart and they're just continuous landing thing. You got to speed airplanes up to fit them in, and someone stuffs up their landing, that mucks up the whole sequence. So it's very complex there. That's top pressure stuff. Full marks those guys. But I sort of I specialised in the search and rescue area earlier on, and I got promoted because of that. I became efficient in that. I became a check controller. I checked the other controllers doing it.
Well, I'd like to ask you more about the differences between the different types of air traffic control. You need to change tapes there, Brian.
Okay, fine.
Out of doing that?
Yes, I did. Like I said, I started out in Port Hedland, and it was a new station that opened. We had 3 search and rescue mission coordinators there, and we had our share of searches up there. Basically, no one to assist other than the other 2 controllers, and we worked a 8-hour shift each day, and one guy off, and covered 7 days a week. Yeah, a lot of personal, especially when you are able to help someone or locate them, and I had various people give a mayday and crash, and I'd be able to organise a helicopter somewhere to get out and rescue them. Did that several times.
It must be hard
to
be on the receiving end of a mayday call.
Yeah, well, normally flight service would take it. Say we had, in those days we had flight service at Canberra, Derby, Hedland, Karratha for a while, and Perth in some areas, and they'd ring me on the intercom. So and so's just given a mayday, or so and so has missed a report. Okay, get other airplanes. I've got other airplanes calling him, no answer. What was his last position? He started to work at where you think he might be. Then you might start ringing stations around the place. Have you seen an airplane fly over? Yeah, one flew over half an hour ago or something. Call him then, and then basically, once he reaches fuel expiry, he's not still flying. So you send someone out looking for him. It's distress phase. So he could have made an emergency landing somewhere and can't tell you. And a couple of times happened where they forgotten to tell us. We are searching for them there. But a few times they crashed, and they're force landed somewhere, and we've rescued them. Yeah, I mean, one guy right out in the middle of the desert on a dry lake, he landed on it, and unfortunately landed in the middle. I learnt from that, the middle of it is soft. The edges are hard. Another pilot told me, if you land on the edge, you'd be right. If you land in the middle, bogged. I said he was stuck out there, and we found him. It was night time by the time we found him, and then we got a ground party out and rescued him and the girl with him and put them in. But yeah, lots of searches. I was like I said before, I was 2 years in Port Hedland, then I had 5 years in Perth, another 2 years in Port Hedland, 8 years in Darwin, and the last couple of years in Perth, until I turned the age 50. So from 28 to 50, I probably spent the last, 22 years, the last 15 or 16 years or something in the search and rescue area.
Did you find it highly stressful?
At times it was. 8 years in Darwin, we had some big searches there. Found them. Even things like the Kirky that went down off here, man, broke in half, and there were fuel coming out of it and guys jumping in the sea and all that sort of thing. We organised helicopters to get out there and winch them out and everything, and sort of, we were the coordinating area for raising these things.
Because you're up against time too, aren't you? Time. Even an aircraft that force lands, his battery, if there's anything left in it for his radio, might work for a while, but eventually it won't work. You've got to get out there and get to him. It could be damaged. If the guy's jammed in the cockpit injured, he might be bleeding to death. I mean, 4 hours could be all the difference between life and death. Yeah, it's a bit stressful. It was one of the stressful areas, and there were only a certain number of guys had the full rating of search and rescue mission coordinator. I had that for quite a few years, and in that time I was an instructor on search and rescue courses. Twice I was instructor. I was a check controller for some years in Perth and in Darwin, checking the other controllers, running scenarios and putting them under pressure and checking their performance. I mean, all air traffic controllers get checked every, I can't remember how long it is now, but say every 3 months or something. You get a check control sit next to you for your whole shift, writing reports on you, quizzing you with questions and that sort of thing. The search and rescue once a year, you get involved in a big search and rescue exercise. You're marked, you can be failed, you can revert back to a lower grade, be retrained. Tower control, all those guys, they're all subject to this. You've got to do a written report every year, you've got to get a 100% result. You get 95%, you're quizzed on those questions until you get 100%. I mean, no other than pilots and air traffic controllers, I don't know anyone that checks. I mean, a doctor, once he's graduated, no one comes and takes him aside and gives him a set of questions. He doesn't get continuation training or retraining or training in new products. They might read themselves and self-train, but policemen, they do some en route continuation training. I know that when they go for officers' courses and things, but A lot of careers don't ever do any other training in quite important jobs.
So why did you end up departing that job?
What happened is they consolidated search and rescue. We used to have a search and rescue centre in every capital city, plus one in Townsville, Alice Springs and Port Hedland. They gradually started closing them. And they ended up with Brisbane and Melbourne and Perth, and they decided they'd close Perth, consolidate its responsibility. As they were consolidating en route control, they used to satellite communications. They gradually consolidated down from lots of little centres to a couple of big centres. And I had the choice at consolidation of Perth time. I just hit 50. I could have taken a golden handshake, 22 years of service, a reasonable return for that. Or I could have gone back into traffic and probably had to demote to retrain to an area. Or I could have possibly transferred to Melbourne. I'd already spent, trouble all over Australia. I didn't want to establish in Perth. So I elected to take the voluntary redundancy package. And while I was sorting it out, I looked around and I found another job. So I said, right, I'm ready, give me one, I'm going. Got another job immediately.
So what's the job?
Then I got a job as a navigator in a geophysical survey company, flying around low level, twin-engine aeroplane, just above the ground, doing geophysical, as a navigator, doing geophysical surveying, operating the computers, the gamma ray spectrometer, the magnetometer, all that sort of stuff.
With your experiences, I mean, I'm particularly thinking of Vietnam. What do you think you gained most out of that war experience, do you think?
You probably appreciate life a lot more. I mean, I lost friends up there. A lot of Australian soldiers died up there, and some Air Force guys. Two of my reasonably close friends were killed doing the same thing that I was doing up there, and they never even found their bodies, which is really sad. So I appreciate life more. I feel I've done things that other people haven't done. I know when we came back, we couldn't really talk, other than two Air Force guys, we couldn't talk back to anyone because everyone just said, oh, you're dropping bombs on babies and all this stuff. It's just, you had to wipe that part of your life for years and years. I can talk about it now a bit, but
did it upset you too much before?
No, just cop shit from everyone all the time. Just bloody, you bastard going there, you're dropping bombs on people. God, mate, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought our government was called upon by their government to help them, and I went up to help them. So I thought. Anyway.
Well, what sort of reaction did you get when you came back from Vietnam?
I haven't got bad vibes from one of the vice presidents of the RSL. I was in Port Hedland once.
Really?
He told me you guys weren't in a real war and you don't know what you're talking about. Oh, fair enough, mate. Okay.
Is that why you don't have a particular affection?
For the RSL, no. Now, I'm a member of a RAAF Vietnam Veterans Association of WA. I've been in that for about 3 years. I didn't have much to do with it for years and years, but I've been in that. I'm treasurer now. I've been treasurer I must have been about 4 years. Been treasurer for 3 years. Just elected unopposed because no one else wants to do it for another year. But that's fine. They're a good bunch of blokes. They're all ex-Air Force, and you can communicate with them all right. Did
all of you RAAF Vietnam blokes find a similar reaction in Australia about dropping bombs on babies when you came back?
I think most people did. Yep. A lot of these guys stayed into the full career in the RAAF. Within the RAAF, it's okay. Or within probably the army, the services is okay. But civilians didn't. I mean, the draft was unpopular. People were sent there against their wishes. A lot of them lost their lives. It's a shame. But a lot of people, most people reckon we did the wrong thing. Yet the government decided that. We didn't say we're going to go there and drop bombs on them. The government decided it. We were in the Air Force. We had to do as, or the Army, whatever it is. We had to do as we were told. We did it. And we thought we were doing the good job and the right thing and all that. And, I mean, years later they had these return home parades and all that sort of thing. And nowadays, on Anzac Day, people are out there cheering and waving flags. I think it's good. But it wasn't like that for a long while.
What do you think?
But I feel it made me stronger. Made me feel that I've done something other people can't do. Something I felt it was worthwhile at the time. I mean, hindsight probably bit of a waste. But no, really, we didn't win the war. We didn't save anyone. A lot of guys lost their lives, both sides. Was it worth it? We became communists anyway. It was to stop the domino theory of all the countries becoming communist, and they became communists. So what?
Well, what did you think about the fall of Saigon?
Yeah, well, just once the Yanks stopped bombing North Vietnam and started retracting, it was just fait accompli. They gave up. They could have won the war, but not enough political will, and that's the way it was.
Did that annoy you that there wasn't that follow through with the Americans?
Yeah, it did in a way, because it meant everything that was lost before was wasted. All the life wasted. I mean, you can drop bombs, lose airplanes, what the hell, are any money and equipment, but the life, yeah. And the guys that are affected by it all too. In the end, you know, there's a lot of guys out there that are psychologically and physically affected by it. And, you know, the end result was it didn't really accomplish anything. We've all got some sort of effect on us. I've even got some. Not psychological really, but other physical things. So,
well, what's that effect?
well, I've got skin problems, which they put down to being up there and not so much exposed to Agent Orange, but skin problems. I've got some hearing loss, probably from shooting guns and engines and things. I've got prostate cancer at the moment. I don't know, I mean, I'm on that age group that gets it, but may have had some effect on that. I got a neck injury from probably from those bird strikes, where if I lift things, like the last job's lifting batteries, basically that's why I do it, stop in the end, I'd lift things heavily and I'd end up, my neck would lock up, and I've got, what they call it, degenerative spondylosis of the neck, and it's gone, they've just put it back to the trauma from those 2 bird strikes, getting hit front on that way and then front on this way. Just some early damage. But, you know, that's fair enough, everyone gets injured in their life. But there's other guys that have got severe problems, and their offspring have got weird problems that no one can explain. I mean, of high proportion.
Did you get to hear much about the protests that were going on in Australia when you were in Vietnam, or did that happen more for you afterwards?
No, I didn't hear much about it up there, no, but coming back you'd see it. But
so did that come as a surprise that was happening within the Australian community?
No, I'd seen... I went straight to America. I was really big over there in 1968.
Because the protests over there would have been huge as well.
Yeah, they were, yeah. Yeah, no, it was... No, we just knew that was happening, just really bad.
How did you feel about the protests?
Just thought they were bloody cowards myself, or they got it wrong. Why protest against the troops? Spit at the troops and throw red paint at the troops who've come back, you know, we've got a leg missing or something. God, it'd be pretty pathetic to do that. Go and do it to a Prime Minister, fine, or the President, okay. Chief of Staff or something, but not the troops. That's why I lost all respect for those people that did that. Way back in there might have been a seed of, you know, stop violence and they stop the war, but shouldn't take it out on the guys that come back.
Think it was expressed in a completely wrong direction?
Yeah, wrong direction, yeah. And I know they got fairly fired up about it, some of them. And they're very outspoken and speaking on television all the time. There weren't very many advocates of the military speaking out saying, you know, we're trying to do the right thing. I never saw that at all.
So you're even saying that the military didn't take on the responsibility to counteract all the protests?
No, but I'm thinking more of individual people that came back. Well, you couldn't. It was just overwhelming. Everyone was against it. I mean, my family, fine, they supported me, but most others didn't normally mention it.
Do you think that's one of the reasons why Vietnam vets are quite tight within their groups?
Probably, yep. Yeah, for some years, probably 10 years after or more, you couldn't even talk about it. I mean, not many people do something in their life they can't talk about. And you try and discuss it, people just go off the brain at you. So,
would you talk about it amongst yourselves?
A bit, yeah. Sometimes you would, especially when guys went missing, and that would all talk about things. Training, like when you're still in the Air Force, you're still training for the next war, sort of thing. So you're using skills you learnt then and trying to prove them. And I mean, I was only in the Air Force a couple of years after I was in Vietnam, but
Yeah.
When you lose, you mentioned your friends who went missing that they've never found. When somebody goes missing like that, how do you conduct a service or a memorial for them?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't
Just
go
wondering
to
if you
their
did anything.
memorial. No, I went to. I've had a few of my friends in Vietnam die. One guy died at 28. 28. Yeah, I went to his funeral.
Was that in Vietnam?
No, he died in Amberley. He was about the same age as me, maybe a little bit older, but he got cancer in the neck and died at 28, and they cut it out of his neck and everything, and it came back up in his brain and that.
Gosh, at 28, that's frightening, isn't
His
it?
wife was still pregnant with their second child
Oh,
when he
gee.
died. Yeah, I was happened to be at Amberley, so I went and saw him at Greenslopes where he died.
So what do you think about, like, on Anzac Day?
Well, it's quite good now because there are big crowds come out and wave, and they're all yelling out, "Go on, you guys! You know, you did the right thing," and you know, it's really good. And we have a little thing together afterwards at a restaurant or somewhere. We get together. Some of the guys are starting to come along now. A few drinks. Restaurant owner, he's really good. He said, "I didn't go to Vietnam, and I'm going to get a good deal here because it's cheap food and opens up on a Sunday and a public holiday." He's a really good restaurateur, so we always go there now. $10, all the food you need all day, sort of thing. You know, he's an excellent bloke.
But that's lovely to get back from the community after so many years. That sort of support.
Yeah, it is. It is really. Yeah, it's better now than it's ever been. Some of our guys are a bit. I think the army guys are far worse off, but some of our guys are a bit withdrawn into themselves and got. There's a few of them TPIs. I'm not TPI, but withdrawn into themselves a bit, and they do need a bit of help. And there's some guys that don't need help, and they won't let me help them. Won't let us help them. I know a couple of guys in really desperate financial, psychological, emotional trouble. They won't. I don't need any help. I don't have anything to do with the military or anything. You know, it's just so. Terrible, really. These were personal friends of mine. They just won't allow us to help them. Can't force them to do it.
We'll keep trying.
Yeah, so I can die.
Do you think that was, you know, that you mentioned the Welcome Home Parade before, that was in, you know, the early 80s? I think it was the early 80s, wasn't it? 80.
Something like that. Was it 86 or 87?
Yeah, 87.
I went to one in Queensland a year after the Sydney one.
Right.
That's the one I went to.
Well, what was that like?
Well, it was 68 in 67 in Vietnam. I left the RAAF in 70, and I think it was 87 or something like that. Say 20 years later, maybe it was early in that. I hadn't seen most of these guys in that 20 years, 18 years or whatever.
Gee.
And the crowd were enthusiastic, finally coming out. So it's like a 20-year hiccup or something. I don't know. But once again, I was back into the Air Force where I made my best friends, and they were all there because most of them retired in Queensland. And it's just like old times. Well, you know, a little bit older and fatter and everything, but it was good fun, and the march was great. And we got a couple of guys now that weren't going to come. We got them in, and yeah, it was good.
So definitely a worthwhile experience.
It was, yeah. And I still go to some Air Force reunions because I train on the 111. There's the F-111 still flying in Australia, and they have had a 25th anniversary of its flight in Australia, and 30th anniversary. My name's still on a list somewhere, and I get an invitation, so I go. The hell, just fly over there. I live in the mess. See all these guys in their 60s and 70s that flew it, and some that trained with me in America.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It's good, yeah.
It's the kind of reunion that you really want to get invited to.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, well, most of them retired now. But you're mixing in there with young Air Force guys that are flying the F-111 today, and we talk to them. And it's good. I got everyone I get invited to.
Do you think the attitude of the Australian public has actually changed with Anzac Day over the last few years? Particularly in reference to Vietnam veterans.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Look, I think our World War I diggers are just about gone, and the mass seems to
public seems to respect them. Like, as they die, they give each individual, they get a big farewell in the press and everything like that. It's really good. And even giving some of them Legion of Honour now, I noticed that from them. They'll be gone in a few years. World War II guys are very old. My dad was he's dead. He died at 80, but that was quite some years ago. So they're on their 90s, 80s, 90s. There's some Korean War blokes. They seem to be a lot forgotten lot. And then there's lots of Vietnam veterans. And then the next lot of the Army guys and SAS guys that went overseas. And once again, I think they seem to be copping a bit of a raw deal. They're poor conditions, and they're getting injected with all sorts of funny things they don't know about, and they're getting psychological problems. And I can see it's not that the public has shunned them, but the military's not really looking after them properly. And knowing that they're now fighting in an unpopular war in Iraq, half the Australian public doesn't want us to be there.
Well, it's kind of got a similarity to what you're involved
to Vietnam in a way, yeah.
So
They probably would not say, I've just come back from Iraq, because they'd probably cop a burst from half the public. Not from me, but I support them. Matter of fact, there's one particular padre in Perth, who's a friend of my mother, who said something on the air. Basically, it wasn't a war, it was a slaughter, and our troops coming back from there. I felt I was going to go and punch him in the nose. Okay, he's nearly 70, but I'm halfway to 70 anyway. I told my mother never to invite me and him to her house at the same time. I just feel I have to support those guys coming back. Get some bloody deadbeat like him, acting under the guise of a minister, denigrating our troops coming back. It's not his place to do that. He should support them, not denigrate them.
It's history repeating itself almost.
It is, yeah. And of course, God, that's got a bit of respect. He's a minister, and various people idolise them. Jeez.
Well, Brian,
so I still get my eye up over things. Yeah, sorry.
That's all right. No, you carry on. No, I was just going to say, Brian, thank you so much for talking with us today and sharing some of your philosophy and also your life story. It's been quite fascinating.
Good. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. And I think I've had a pretty interesting life, and
You certainly have.
I'm richer for it all.